Hello, are we back? Hello?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
Technology has made its mark on the conference already. Sorry.
I have to apologize to all of you, especially to the Minister Boštjan Koritnik. Well, I must admit I organized this because I know you are a great improviser. So I somehow wanted to give you, like, because you don't have adrenaline these days, and I wanted to organize this for you. So if you could be so kind, and you will now tell us about the connection between basketball and blockchain once again, and then we will start with official, your personal view on open data. So please, once again, and apologies.
No problem. Of course, blockchain is always a useful, let's say, a mechanism or tool to gather data, to have a distributed network of data holders, and maybe someday basketball players will be bought and sold with cryptocurrencies. So those are my first ideas regarding blockchain and basketball, and I believe a lot of people already have ideas, startups, and similar endeavors about the subject matter. So hopefully I'll see that as soon as possible in real life.
Thank you, Minister Koritnik. And now please share your view of open data with us. The word is yours, please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, it is a pleasure to be here today and to be able to welcome you at the conference on open data as Digital Economy Accelerator, which is organized, as you all know, in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Administration, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Slovenia, and the Technology Park Ljubljana. Thank you all. The goal of today's event is to foster the cooperation between private and public sector in the field of data. Data has been recognized as one of the most important assets, not just within the public sector, but also regarding the economy and the society as a whole. As recognized by the European Strategy for Data, data-driven applications can benefit citizens and businesses in many ways. With them, we can improve healthcare, create a cleaner environment, safer transport systems, reduce the costs of public services, improve energy efficiency, and with that, the overall sustainability. In line with that, our common goal today is to discuss how best to encourage and support creation of innovative solutions based on open data in order to help digital economy grow. At the level of the European Union, a legal framework that advances the opening of public data is the new directive on open data and public sector information. The directive extends the scope of the rules on the reuse of public sector information beyond public sector bodies, with the goal to include also public undertakings in the transport and utilities sectors. It also introduces the concept of high-value data sets, which are to be made available free of charge through an application programming interface, API. Finally, it promotes open data as the data in its most noble form. At the Ministry of Public Administration, we perceive the National Open Data Portal as the crucial accelerator of the development in this field. The portal serves as a central catalog of datasets in the country and a one-stop shop for publishing the data itself in open and machine-readable formats. I am pleased to point out that Slovenia is one of the few countries to have records and collections kept by the National Statistical Office, the General Secretariat of the Government of the Republic of Slovenia, and that of the National Assembly on the portal of open data. But our goal has been more than that, building and strengthening the open data ecosystem gathered and connected around the portal, startup entrepreneurs, developers, researchers, companies, and so on. In order to proliferate the idea of open data among business actors, we established the Open Data Hub in March this year, and I'm happy to say that this conference is a direct result of this cooperation. We have been also organizing open data hackathons. in 2018, our ministry organized the first hackathon in cooperation with the Ministry of Culture and the Slovenian Tourist Organization. I can proudly say that the project received an award of the European Network of Cultural Tourism. Similar event was organized last year in cooperation with the Slovenian police and the municipality of Ljubljana Police Department on the topic of traffic safety and mobility. Both events were very successful cases of collaboration between businesses and public sector. I have been looking forward to our next Open Data Hackathon, which is planned for September and will focus on the challenges of environment and climate change. A week ago, Slovenia took part in the first pan-European hackathon EU versus Virus that was held under the auspices of the European Innovation Council in collaboration with the European Commission, member states, organizations, civil society, innovators, partners, and investors from across Europe. The hackathon was attended by nearly 21,000 participants around the world. Slovenia exceeded expectations in terms of the number of participants. The current circumstances connected to COVID-19 have provided a challenge for creating applications that help the general public to understand the pandemic and the public institutions to devise and implement the appropriate measures. In Slovenia, many interesting projects emerged. Coronavirus Media Watch, to mention one, was launched by the UNESCO's International Research Center on Artificial Intelligence, which is based in Ljubljana. Another good example is a crowdsourced app, COVID-19 Sledilnik, which serves as a source of quality data for other apps. The many activities we have undertaken in this field have been recognized also by the international organizations. According to the OECD, our data index, Slovenia has been among the top countries in the world regarding the open data policy and activities. Our common goal is for Slovenia to remain an example of best practice with a view to maximizing the use of open data to build applications that will provide good digital service to citizens and businesses. The purpose of today's event is to discuss not just what we already have, but rather what we could do to do better together. The power is in collaboration. Together we can achieve more. I'm looking forward to fruitful discussions, and I wish you all a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Koritnik, for your view of open data. And I would like to invite our next welcome speaker. This will be Mr. Jernej Pintar, Head of Tech Community at Technology Park Ljubljana. Mr. Pintar, welcome. And since you have a lot of professional experiences in business networking and all sorts of other fields, and also in negotiations, I'd like to ask you one icebreaker question. According to your praxis, what is the most important negotiation skill in your opinion?
Stand in your position. Stand in your position even when they try to take your fortress. You have to stand your position. But as you said, networking, yeah, I know that here today we have a lot of people that I know personally. I would love to shake your hands, look into your eyes that I haven't seen for far too long now. And so I would like to welcome you to Technology Park, Ljubljana. It's a place of some wonderful technologies. We have companies that do laser systems for operations of the eyes. Then we have electric motors in wheels, and we have cooling solutions for supercomputers, and we have deep physics and all of those kind of things. And I think quite a lot of that came up in the recent COVID crisis, where we had a lot of different activities which went, they were from prototyping respirators, prototyping masks that are today printed in the US, the hackathon that was already mentioned. We even helped with one cure for the COVID, which has already cured some people. So we have good results on that. We made recommendations to companies, for example, not meaning to keep your distance and wash your hands and stuff like that, but how to run your company in difficult times. So how to make your colleagues feel secure and brave, how the management should act like, you know, like in the movie Braveheart scene, you know, the first ones, not hide somewhere, and how to run your company so that not the most frightened people take control of it and paralyze it. And basically how to manage your team online. And about the open data, I have a thought that I would perhaps like to share. It would be wonderful if companies, developers in Slovenia could seize this opportunity through this open data, find some business models, find some jobs, because I think that the COVID crisis has an even bigger battle going on, and that's a battle for jobs. For a little while, it was a hidden battle. And I think today, I will be brave with this statement, but I think that the battle for jobs, global battle for jobs, is becoming a much bigger battle than the COVID battle. Who will have jobs at the end of this? And I would be super glad if some of the companies or developers could create some new business models on the open data, right? So find some business solutions, use the data, because I think we will need jobs now more than we did them ever before. That would be my opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jerne Pintar. Thank you for your words. And let's go to the third speaker. Welcome to Mr. Igor Zorko, Vice President of Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Slovenia, who will give us the third welcome speech. Mr. Zorko, since you are also the chairman of the board of Slovenian Digital Coalition, and you also play basketball, as I know, can you personally see the connection between basketball and digitalization?
I see the connection between the cooperation. So if you want to have a digital society and we all understand the digitalization, it's very similar to the basketball. When we have to understand what's our goal and we have to work together. So it's not enough for one member to do something or one player, but we have to do everything together. So one missing part may be the problem for all the team. So it's the same in digitalization, it's the same in economy, it's the same in all kind of activities that we do on the Chamber of Commerce or in the Digital Coalition.
Thank you very much. And now let's turn our focus to open data. Please, the word is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to welcome you in the name of Slovenian ICT Association, ICT Network, and Slovenian Chamber of Commerce. They all asked me to present a welcome to everybody who is listening to today's discussion. I think it's very important that Slovenian digital industry, public sector and research sector has a long tradition on working together on open data, on big data, and at the same time on artificial intelligence, and that we all are investing a lot of our knowledge and time to have added value for everybody. So for the business and at the same time for our citizens and community. So the open data has an important role in Slovenian life. And I think it's very important that we already built a lot of solutions and applications that we can use in everyday life. We don't see the data, but we can feel them. So we can add value in such a small community that is Slovenia, but at the same time we have the same problems, the same challenges, corona and non-corona challenges as all the other worlds have. So we have the national understanding of importance of data and digital use of data, and that in everyday life and business. At the same time, we understand that we have to use the data in the way that it's safe, it's transparent, and it's added value, not doing something bad for the user. So we open a network of different partners that already are involved, the public administration, they involve the research community, the startups like a technology park, and all the other chambers of commerce and digital networks. So we are trying to build an ecosystem, and this ecosystem has to be put up together from the ICT companies, digital companies, from traditional companies, and from the researchers and all the other specters of the society. And we have to develop next future services that can use the data and the concept and business models then can offer the added value. So I would like to invite all the members and listeners today to be a part of this ecosystem, to be a part of ICT Network, to be a part of our together projects, and that we can do hand-to-hand together next steps for open data and to adapt the knowledge of open data and artificial intelligence to everybody. So everybody have the competencies to use this data. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zorko. Now we will go, we will continue with our program, but I would like to thank once again to our three welcome speakers. You are warmly welcome to stay with us and follow the conference, of course, but in case you have some other urgent matters on your schedules, I would just like to thank you once again for joining us, for giving us your personal views on open data and to give us welcome speeches. So maybe I suppose Minister Koritnik will tell us goodbye now at this point. Maybe Erne, maybe Mr. Zorko.
Unfortunately, I have to attend other obligations, but I feel sorry, but I know I'll get an update from you. So thank you, and to all of you, enjoy the conference. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to all our speakers. Have a nice day. Goodbye. And we will continue with our program. We will start with the content appearances. So I would like to welcome our first key speaker, our guest, Mrs. Barbara Ubaldi from OECD, Head of Digital Government and Open Data Team. Now let me point out very interesting fact that Mrs. Ubaldi was one of the 100 world's most influential people in 2018 and among top 20 most influential people in digital government in 2019. So Mrs. Ubaldi, are you here with us? Hoping you're here with us. Can we maybe hear you? Mrs. Barbara Ubaldi, are you with us?
Yes, you should be able to hear me now very well and to see me very well.
Okay. Hello, yeah. Hello, welcome. And I just shortly introduced you, but I would just give you the opportunity to tell us your presentation about digital government and open data. So not to take you too much of your precious time, just the word is yours, please.
Thank you very much. And I think you should see my presentation right now, if you can just confirm it. Yes?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, happy to see you all in good health. I would have been much happier to be there with you in person in the beautiful city of Ljubljana, which is a neighboring city to my home country, Italy. Maybe next time, once this whole craziness will be over and we'll be able to travel again, we'll be able to mingle, because I think one of the key points that the three initial introductory remarks said underlined quite well is to what extent open data provides opportunity to strengthen collaborations, networking, joining up efforts. So I think for doing this, occasions that enable to bring people together are essential, even if we have seen in the past few months to what extent the fact of being able to operate in a digital environment doesn't provide exactly a 100% equal alternative to meeting in person, but certainly provides an interesting enough alternative to keep having some of the collaborations and activities going on, which I agree with one of the introductory speakers, that are going to be essential to make sure to address some of the implications emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic, which are not only health related. I think they have very well underlined some of the important implications, which will have a social nature, environmental nature, and economic nature. And I think that what we have seen in the past few years that has become a very strongly underlined message in the past few months is to what extent we have economies and we have societies which are digital, which act and operate in the digital environment and are capable to use digital tools and data. And we as governments need to be able to be up to that speed of action, up to that expectation. So in our view at the OECD, when we work on open data, that's at the core of the work that we do on data-driven approaches to make sure that governments operate in the most efficient, strategic, transparent, and innovative possible way, and find strategic, efficient, and innovative ways to interact with the broader ecosystem of individuals, of private sector actors, which right now are of a very different nature, and we speak of large corporations as much as how many startups that are very interesting partners for governments, as well as they are better engaged with the social actors. And that's why for us, the whole work around open data and data-driven approaches are at the core of the work on digital government, because you cannot have a government that is digital and therefore responds to the needs of a digital economy if that government does not recognize the importance of data as an asset, but also creates the conditions to be able to leverage the use of this data as an asset. This was the key message that when in 2014, the OECD adopted the recommendation on digital government strategies, we embedded in this instrument. This instrument is not like a European directive, but it's a soft law instrument that all member countries accept at the unanimity to adopt, and they commit to implement this instrument, this soft law piece. And one of the key principles of this piece on digital government precisely recognizes the importance of data as an instrument to make sure that government delivers public value to economies and societies. And it's since then that we've started working with governments to understand what does it mean designing open data policies that then get translated into initiatives, programs, projects that give some value to societies and economies. And in that sense, the analytical work that we started doing since 2014 was complemented by measurement work, by quantitative work that resulted into the Open Data Index, which is an index of the OECD on open data, which is called Our Data Index, which stands for Open, Useful, and Reusable Data. What are the key messages that we want to give with this index and with the framework that supports the index is that accessibility, it's essential. Availability, it's essential. But reuse, it's an extremely necessary requirement to be able to produce value. And that's why one of the key messages we always wanted to give from a policy point of view is that it's great to have a nice portal. It's important to increase the availability of the data, but if you don't also take actions that focus on high value data sets and on fostering the reuse of the data by a whole plethora and whole number of actors, then there's no real value that is going to be produced, because without the reuse of the data, sure, we can have value in terms of higher transparency of governments, but certainly we miss out the opportunity to create some of the economic value that can be created through the reuse of open data. Now the index has become more mature, and what we've seen is that if we look at the three areas, governments have certainly improved their focus on, and therefore they've used the index as a policy instrument to increase the focus on efforts around the three main set of actions: increasing the availability, making it more accessible to a higher number of actors, and fostering the reuse. However, we see that there's still much work to be done when it comes to working with the ecosystem, collaborating, networking, and joining efforts. And that's why I think that the conversation we are having here today in relation to the role of data as an accelerator of economic value creation and as a tool to provide more opportunities for the economy, I think it's essential. And in that sense, I think we've been the privilege of working with Slovenia in the past few years on open data. The government and the ministry has been very active in all our work on open data, which is essential for us because it's important to understand how we can best help government. And what I really always liked about the approach that Slovenia took was really this focus on the working with somebody else, working with the actors, creating this form of important partnerships and collaborations through hackathon events, through focusing on the reuse. So I think it's something that we really noticed as a flavor that makes Slovenia be part of the group of countries that are a bit more forward-looking and at the cutting edge when they, in terms of understanding the value of open data for creating economic value. So I wanted to share with you a little bit what we see happening in other countries that have had equally an important focus on economic value creation. These are countries that, as you see, cover the whole geographical spectrum of the OECD, that has countries spread all over the world. I think Korea has been one of those countries that has placed right from the beginning, and therefore they have the importance of the establishing a governance system, and which means not only forms of coordination bodies, but also focus importance and relevance to create the incentives for reusers in the broad ecosystem to use open data as a platform to foster economic value creation. At a certain point, Korea even made an explicit objective of its policy to avoid or to impede the reuse of data from the public sector when the reuse could be done by actors within the broader economy with the purpose to create economic opportunities for actors within the private sector. In the case of Colombia, a project has been implemented with an eye to the ecosystem to try to support all those entrepreneurs who are not fully knowledgeable or aware or capacitated to actually use open data to provide economic value creation. And the idea was really to help them develop a sustainable business model that could enable them to make most of the use of open data to actually produce results, produce services, and produce new applications. In the case of Sweden, very interesting, the initiative Act for Sweden that emerged originally as an initiative aimed to organize hackathon events under the driving responsibility of the main government, the main ministry responsible for open data, became an initiative, and more than anything, a platform to engage communities and to engage different partners, particularly in the tech sector of Sweden, to make sure that this hackathon initiative was not just a one-off initiative undertaken by the government once a year, but could be seen as an accelerator of this type of partnerships between the public sector and the private sector, could push the opening up of data from the public sector. So there could be like a very positive interaction between the demand and the offer of the data, and could actually foster innovation. Innovation not only within the economy, but innovation also within the public sector. In the case of Ireland, in order to support the economic side of the open data ecosystem, the Open Data Engagement Fund was created to grant out some funding to support specific open data projects that support also the reuse of the data made available on the main portal. Spain is a country that since the Plan Avanza, it was called Plan Avanza Action Plan, Plan Avanza Agenda was the information society plan that was adopted around 2007, 2008. They made part of their information society program. So when some of us were not even thinking about open data, a specific action on the release of public sector information as open data, particularly targeting the private sector. So in Spain, there has been a growth of private sector entities called infomediaries that have emerged as a result of this specific focus that the government of Spain placed around economic value creation emerging from the opening up of government data. Last but not least, the United States has also tried to focus very much on the use of open data to create new forms of engagements, to create also to involve, to engage citizens as part of the solution. So the whole idea of how open data can help crowdsourcing ideas to come up with specific results that the government alone could not be producing. And that has been really helpful in coming up with very innovative ideas and concepts around, for instance, software in the scientific domain, and also that has led to the identification of innovative technological solutions that have helped back governments in making their job better. So I think these examples are all very much in line with what we are seeing in the past couple of months in relation to open data being a vector of better communication with our societies, of better design and delivery of public services, and better engagement with actors within the broader ecosystem, which are three elements that we recognize as being key and important since forever. So that's not new, that's not a novelty. But I think that more than ever in the past couple of months, we've seen really the untapped potential around open data for these three main goals. And I think this has been very much also in line with some of the key messages that, based on the last edition of the Our Data Index that I just presented, we have been identifying with my team in relation to key messages that can be drawn from the results that we've seen in the index. First of all, the fact that we cannot really design open data policies and initiatives as separate from all the work that we need to do to establish solid data governance frameworks. So there's the tendency still to believe that whatever we do within governments to establish frameworks that enable us to better govern data government-wide, it's separated from open data. That's not true. So if we want to make sure that is in a sustainable way, for instance, we can continue providing data for the economic sector to do something out of it, we need to make sure that the data governance required is in place. We talk so much about quality of data, but the quality of the data is very different also, or the requirements in terms of quality of data are very different according to the different users of data. There's a very much recognized urgency to have data released in a timely manner, which is an urgent need from the private sector that needs to have data being released in a constant manner, in a timely manner, to be able to keep providing services in a continuous way. Maybe civil society organizations that utilize data to increase public sector transparency, for instance, have quality intended in a different way. Precision matters, because if data is utilized, for instance, for conducting analysis on transparency or corrupt behavior of public officials, of course, it's better to have data with a timeline which is a bit slower, but with an extremely high level of precision. The second point that we have communicated as a key message when it comes to open data as an accelerator of economic value creation is the absolute need to intensify the efforts that target the reaching out to the external reusers within the broader ecosystem and the engagement of these communities. So it's extremely important to make sure that, as we know that there are people in our economy that we know are reusing data, same for the society, we keep a strong focus on making sure that the number of those reusers somehow increases and keeps growing. And last but not least, if we really want to make sure that economic value creation is produced, we need to monitor it. So we still see that many governments do not prioritize the monitoring of the value creation that is being produced out of the open data policies and initiatives, as they should, to be able to see what kind of trend is happening, who's being actually collaborating to produce this economic value creation, and how these partnerships can eventually be boosted. As from the OECD perspective, we, in line with what I just said, that data governance is essential. We also do recognize that there's a need to help governments make sure that this data governance is supported by specific measures that enable the public sector actors, as well as the broad ecosystem, to count on the possibility of being able to access and to be able to share the data. So what we see is that we take for granted sometimes that accessibility and the conditions to share the data, taking into consideration of all the possible related implications in terms of privacy, in terms of inclusiveness of the public engagement. So all the governance related issues being taken into account. We want to help governments establish the governance, which includes also having some specific recommendations that maintain continuity, sustainability of actions meant to guarantee access and sharing. Because what we see is that sometimes open data and related actions is a priority of a specific government. There are elections and priorities change and efforts towards open data are discontinued. If we focus on open data as an accelerator of economic value creation and social value creation, this cannot happen. We do need to recognize the open data is a priority for a society. It's a priority for an economy. It's a priority for a public administration. So it doesn't have a political color. And that's why at the OECD, we are working towards the adoption of a recommendation, again, a soft instrument of the OECD, this time focused in particular on enhancing access and sharing of data with the specific goal, as I said, to make sure that all efforts towards the implementation, design and implementation of open data policies can continue in the long run. We would not be practicing what we preach if we had not decided to actually reach out to our member countries and delegates to work together in this COVID-19 crisis situation. So the idea was to actually launch a call for evidence to try to gather insights and information on how open data is being used across your countries to actually identify concrete answers to specific actions, to specific questions that are emerging by the different, key questions that you are trying to respond, because they are emerging from the different aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic, to design specific activities and to respond, therefore, to the needs associated to the different phases of the crisis. I think we all have come across pieces that have been written around the need to focus on the readiness of governments, on the reactiveness of governments, on the capacity to design recovery, the 4 exit strategies, and make sure that this is part of longer term reforms. So we are really trying to understand with governments if we can help you make a little sense of what all of you as governments have been doing in the past couple of months, to be able to understand in simple terms what are, first of all, the high value data sets in a moment of crisis like this one, because we do all hope that a similar crisis to this one won't happen again. But let me tell you that in the past few years, we've been working with governments that were dealing with natural disasters, for instance. There was a crisis that had a number of impacts and implications that could be assimilated to those that you're dealing with right now. So the idea is, can we help you out and see to what extent data and what data is being used right now and what challenge open data leaders in government had, for instance, when they were trying to make the data available or to link up with data stewards across the administration to make sure the data available within the different parts of the administration would be made available as open data quickly, to enable actors in the broader ecosystem to use that to help come up with answers to specific questions. What we can learn from that, and how can we eventually help you out in guiding how you can best make the use of data as you start dealing with the subsequent phases of the crisis and maybe be better prepared for the future. So the call is open. We are not only asking for government examples in the repository that we're pulling together that then we will use to analyze what have been the trends. There are many examples that actually underline the work that actors from outside of the public sector, so companies, academic institutions, social civil society organizations, have examples of concrete use of open government data to produce specific answers, specific solutions, specific projects. So this is an open call to anybody who would like to provide more information on what you have done, so that we can gather the insights and see, first of all, if that can be replicated in other countries, and how can that be best used to learn from this experience and not make it a wasted opportunity to grow together. I stop here, but I'll be with you for the rest of the conference, so I'll be happy to answer any question that may come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ubaldi. And we have one question for you from our listeners, our participants. So I would like to pass the question to you, and maybe if you can be so kind and give us the answer immediately. So what kind of measures would you recommend as best in order to increase the use of open data, like in case financial support?
Yeah, so from a financial support perspective, what we have seen, I'm talking about the perspective from a government perspective, right? So what we have seen, the best practices being from governments, is to identify specific funding around concrete proposals that were addressing a specific challenge. For instance, I'm thinking about the government of Mexico that a few years ago had put out some challenges. They were challenges for the public sector, right? So the public sector was encountering specific policy problems, and these policy problems had been identified by different institutions across the public sector, so not only by the ministry responsible for open data, and some incentives were provided for actors in the broader ecosystem, private sector, civil society, and so on, to actually come forward and say, okay, we have this idea to work together with you to help you through the use of open data come up with a solution for that specific problem you had. So that was a really strong financial mechanism to actually engage the ecosystem. A couple of examples I gave, like the Irish Fund, it's a very constant and regular way to provide consistent financing. And in the case of Portugal has been financing projects that are meant, so financing projects undertaken by the broad ecosystem, not by the public sector, with the specific goal of pushing forward some strategic orientations of the government. And at a certain point, the main strategic orientation was to accelerate the adoption of open data approaches. So the specific funding was going towards towards project proposals and ideas that had a component of open data inside. So I think the best way to produce financing is, or provide financing, is always to make sure that the financing somehow also helps the government, either because you want to see a growth in the awareness and in the reuse of the open data by a certain group, or because you want to incentivize the use of open data towards the solution of specific problems. And I think that the current situation provides a wealth of opportunities to identify problems, questions, or needs that can be better responded together with working together with the private sector. Just one last point in my answer. For instance, Portugal is trying to see how to utilize better partnerships with the private sector in using open data to use the touristic industry over the summer. Because as we know, the economic impact on the touristic industry of Portugal, like many other countries, can be high over the summer. So they're trying to see how to support this reuse of open data to address that specific problem. So my answer is associate the funding with specific goals that you have as public sector.
Thank you very much for this answer. And we have one more question for you. Your presentation was very interesting and also a bit provocative, and it's very nice to have so much participants sending us questions. So what is the GDPR role in structuring the open data? If you can maybe give a short comment on this one. GDPR role?
Yeah. The GDPR, okay. Well, I think that the GDPR has been, well, for all European countries, it's the GDPR and it's the directives that provide a regulatory environment that is very different from other countries around the world. So I think that GDPR has, there are very controversial responses to this question, because I think on one side, the GDPR has definitely made all governments aware of some side implications concerning some key basic principles around privacy, for instance, of data, which are essential and which are extremely important. Because I don't think that when governments, not all governments embracing open data had a flag high in a strong awareness around those specific aspects, which are essential. But at the same time, many governments have felt that the GDPR was actually limiting their efforts when it was coming to opening up open data. I don't think that the GDPR is limiting open data policies. The GDPR implies a more structured approach towards having national data strategies. Okay, so I think that's the point, is that the GDPR has pushed and has accelerated for the relevance for governments to have a more structured and strategic approach towards specific data-related initiatives, either them being within the public sector, so for data not being opened up but being shared inside, or in relation to open data policy. So maybe the GDPR is slowing us a little bit in the short term, but I think in the longer term, it's simply helping governments to be a little bit more structured and in depth in dealing with all the governance issues related to data.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ubaldi. Just to ask my core team, my technical team, if there are some more questions on chat or Q&A, please. Oh, we have one very long question for you, Mrs. Ubaldi. If just let me read it through, okay? Just a second. So, dear all, we have all encountered how data can be used for beneficial purposes in rather extreme case of COVID. But how do you think should we improve citizen engagement on public service innovation and more transparent governance? In my opinion, untangible promise of a better place to live, it isn't motivating enough, at least for now, or at least in this early stage that open data and open government data are currently at. On the other hand, the promise, idea, and importance of data science should be included not only in IT faculties, but on every field, engaging all students, affecting different parties accordingly. Since OGD needs a more holistic approach in terms of its assessment, should we also include a wider picture on educational system in this education in order to educate tech-savvy users to contribute to the idea of data openness? I'm sorry for so many questions, said our listener Aljaž, but I think these are quite interesting points. Maybe Mrs. Ubaldi, if you can give us short your perspective about this.
Yeah. So these are all very important points that matter much more from a governance perspective than from just an open data technical perspective. So I really welcome them very much. First of all, when it comes to public sector innovation, the key point there is to shift the focus, for instance, from a service delivery perspective to a service design and delivery perspective. Why am I saying this? Because to really be innovative on public service innovation through the engagement of citizens, we need to change completely the perspective and change our approach and understand that that type of engagement, you do the right innovation through engagement. If when you design the service, you already find ways to actually engage the users. The UK, as being a leading country in that sense, is extremely difficult. So let me tell you that we've been working on citizens as partners at the OECD, and our the digital team, the data team, and the Accelerator on public sector innovation have been working a lot on this. Still, there are not that many cases that concretely demonstrate this engagement and collaboration, but I think that this shift in the understanding, it's a possible way to do it. On transparent governance, I completely agree. It's not sufficient to have an open data portal, so to have more openness, to actually foster the transparency. I think the response there starts from focusing on the demand, okay? Sometimes there's a demand on the data that comes from the ecosystem that is not listened. So we publish what we think the ecosystem wants, and we don't listen to the demand. So to me, the answer again there is to start from the demand and not from the offer. And again, going back to the ecosystem, which brings me back to the, down to the last point on the educational system. I strongly think that to make sure that people see the value of open data and see the concrete impact on how their lives can change, because I think one of the introductory remarks said very interesting that we don't see the data, but we feel the data, meaning we really feel if something has been done, and as a common citizen, we don't care if that came from the use of data or not. We don't ask for that. But for this to be a shared or for having a critical mass of people that are impacted and see the difference, we need to have a higher number of people that are engaged in these collaborations and that are in the possibility or in the capacity of reusing data. And that's why educational systems need to be at the core, need to be at the center. We need to start from there. We need to have people in our society, starting with the youngsters, who have the capacities to do that and have the willingness to do that, have the curiosity to do that, because you need to be creative and curious to experiment also. So I think the educational system needs to be very much corrected. And I finish by saying that we use a lot, especially nowadays, the expression policy coherence. So to address all those points, you need to be able to have the service design and delivery agenda that is connected to the open data agenda, that is connected to the public sector innovation agenda, that is connected to the open government agenda, and that is connected to the educational agenda. So only when we see the common goal, like again, it was said earlier, why do we compare this to basketball? Because this needs to be a team's effort. So only if we connect the goals and we see how the goal of getting better value for the many needs to be the result of all those policies connected, then we can get closer to them.
Thank you very much, but we have one more question. And this will be the last one. And after this one, I will kindly ask you maybe just to stay with us and check our chat, because there are quite many questions for you, Mrs. Ubaldi. But let me read the last one. Some data have not been disclosed at regional level, for example, even after filling FOIA request. How could we face this resistance in Italy in these challenging COVID-19 times?
Yeah, my answer is to make sure that this becomes a cross-border agenda, meaning I have to say, unfortunately, when we talk about cross-border data flow, still the focus is very much on the technical side of it. It's not on recognizing the importance of that. So governments, and that's the work we are trying to do with our member countries and the responsible people, is for having the governments accept that specific data sets need to be released, need to be made available as open data, and this becomes like a necessity, especially in situations like this one. And especially at the regional level, I'm talking about Europe, but for Latin America is the same. So there are regions that need, so it's that the top level is the political leadership that needs to understand that there is no yes or no. It's a must. The specific data sets across the borders as a concept need to be made available for being able to join efforts and for citizens to be, yes, to compare things and to see how trends are going on in different countries.
Thank you very much for now, but as I said, I would really prefer if you would be so kind and check our chat box. We will try to give you some questions and to receive some questions maybe later, but for now, really, thank you, Mrs. Ubaldi. To move further through our program, I would like to welcome to next key speaker, Esther Bodil-Heyer, Senior Consultant at Capgemini Invent, and Laura van Knippenberg, Consultant at Capgemini Invent. I don't know if I pronounced correctly, but anyway, warm welcome to Esther. Esther, are you here with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Hello, we can hear you. Welcome.
Wonderful.
Just to ask you a very short question, as I heard a very interesting news. You love sports, all sports with wind and water, like surfing, sailing, rowing, and in the winter, snowboarding. Is that correct?
Yes, all kinds of water, if frozen or not. That's where you can find me if I'm not behind the screen, and really happy to talk with you today.
And also very interesting thing, you like to travel by motorcycle. Where did you travel by motorcycle? What was your last trip? It's very interesting.
The last trip I did was 3 weeks across France.
Oh, great. Very interesting.
Especially the south of France, yes. And then because I lived in Lyon for half a year, so I have sympathy, and I really like the country, and being by motorcycle is just a very free way of traveling. That's what I enjoy.
Oh, nice, very nice. So now kindly invited to give us a perspective on something else. It's not by motorcycle, but your presentation about the economic impact of open data. So please, the word is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be talking about the economic impact of open data together with my colleague Laura. So I'm not sure if you also want to introduce her, otherwise we will take it from here.
Yes, I would like to say hello to Laura van Knippenberg. I don't know, can we hear Laura, or is she there with you? I'm not sure.
No, unfortunately, we're not together. We're remote working, all of us. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you, Laura. Hello.
Okay.
Nice to have you here with us. And as I said, I used some interesting data about Esther because it's very interesting for me that women travel by motorcycle around. So I'm sorry, but warmly welcome to you as well, of course. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for actually having us here. And we're really happy to talk about the economic impact of open data today. In such a great conference with so many valuable, important guest speakers and input. So it's our honor. And of course, the topic, the economic impact of open data, is so close to our heart because we have been researching around this topic for the last month. And in the beginning of the year, we published our findings in our report, Economic Impact of Open Data, Value Creation for in Europe. And today we would like to tell you a bit more about the background, the European Data Portal, and then much more about the actual insights that we found out. And let me go to the next slide. Here we go. And before we do that, there's not so much to add after your kind introduction, but to tell you a bit more about with whom you are talking here today. Myself, I'm German. I come from Berlin. I live in the Netherlands now, and I'm with Capgemini Invent. Capgemini Invent is leading the European Data Portal consortium for the European Commission. And I'm with the European Data Portal for 2 years now, a little bit more. And since then, very much enthusiastic about finding out what is the impact of open data, how can we measure it, how can we improve it, how can we connect the different stakeholders in the member states and in the organizations in private and public sector to really drive this and understand it better. And this is what I've been doing in the last weeks, and also putting all my heart in the report, telling you more about in a second. But first, giving the floor to Laura, my dear colleague.
Hi, yes, so thanks, Laura Knippenberg. I've been with the European Data Portal for some time now, also mostly focusing on impact topics, such as the economic impact report that we will be discussing today, but also assessing the the open data maturity state of being across Europe. So this is something that we do annually. I will be focusing my efforts on that as well. And also during the COVID times, we have dedicated a specific section on COVID-19 related data sets, data initiatives, and data stories. And that's something that I coordinate with a team. Also from my side, thank you again for having us. I'm quite excited to be here and also curious to hear more your views on the report and also to the next presentations. I believe in terms of the report, Esther, you will be discussing more the top-down approach. Would you like to elaborate a bit on that?
That's correct. So you could say that we try to tackle the huge topic of the economic impact of open data from two sides. And while Laura, you were more coming from the bottom-up approach, looking at specific examples, prorating them to their potential for Europe. I was coming more from the top and looking at Europe as a whole, and how can we make statements about the Europe-wide economy. This will be also a little bit the two focus points.
Yes.
of our presentation when we talk about the different views on impact.
Yes, indeed. So we will start with a bottom-up approach that I will be presenting, and then afterwards comes the top-down approach. But before we get into that, I will just quickly give a brief overview of the European Data Portal itself, just for those of you who are maybe a little bit less aware of it. I am not able to control the screen. Esther, could you move to the next slide, please? So yes, indeed, as has been mentioned, Esther and I are part of the team that runs the European Data Portal in name of the European Commission. We're from Capgemini Invent, but we do it together with a whole consortium of partners that we lead. And the European Data Portal is basically focused on making open data available throughout Europe for a really broad range of audiences. So you could think of data scientists, but also academic researchers, but also organizations and businesses, as well as the general public. And we've been doing this since 2015, that the European Data Portal is running. So we've been around for some time, which is good. But more specifically, if you could go to the next slide, please. The European Data Portal offers three main services. So the first one is being the main access point for open data, as I mentioned. So making open data across Europe discoverable, enable users to search for open data sets by category, keywords, regions, etc. Then a large part of our activities focus on supporting data providers from 35 different countries in how to collect, how to open up, and how to maintain open data and their metadata that is associated. And thirdly, a large focus point is the research that we do. So we enable users to find out the latest findings of the research, as well as events around open data. And the biggest report that we do is the 5-year, but we do it each 5 years, which is Economic Impact of Open Data report, which we will be discussing in more detail. And also, just a few weeks ago, we have launched a specific COVID-19 related section that I mentioned just earlier, in which we specifically curate COVID-19 related data sets or data related initiatives, such as dashboards that have been created or hackathons that are organized. And we create data stories trying to bring the different possibilities of bringing value with the open data that is available to life. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to check it out on the website. But for now, I would say without further ado, let's get into the report itself. Yes, next slide, please. Thank you.
Yes.
And as mentioned, I will be focusing on the bottom-up approach, so mostly on the benefits for society through several different examples and different ways in which open data is already used or could easily be used to create value, and trying to make some sort of causal change with a lot of assumptions, of course, but to be able to extrapolate the results to the whole of Europe. And there is basically such a variety of ways in which open data can create value to society, but I just want to discuss a few with you, given the time limit that we have. So let's get started with some of the examples. Let's start with an easy one. So how many of you have found yourself stuck in traffic or in public transport if you use it? Such as, for example, you find yourself stuck on a cold train platform because a train is delayed and you didn't know about it. I mean, probably more than a few, right? At least I know I have. And with open data, such as real-time traffic data or real-time public transport data, huge amounts of time can be saved if we use this data in the right way to notify us of delayed trains or traffic jams that we want to avoid. And it might be just a few minutes here and there that you would save on a daily basis or a weekly basis. But if you would accumulate it to a year, and for all the people that would travel in Europe, it would be huge. So we made an example of just the people that travel by train, and we calculated that approximately 27 million hours of time could be saved with just these few minutes that you could save with the use of open data-based applications. So imagine what we could do with that time, right? Another example is the one on the right. So imagine there is an accident, or someone is having a cardiac arrest, or any kind of critical situation. How great would it be if emergency services can arrive to the scene of the incident faster, or even better, in case of, for example, the cardiac arrest? A bystander or someone living close by can already start first aid or CPR before the arrival of the ambulance, which, as the numbers show, greatly enhances the chances of survival. And with the help of open data-based apps, for example, certified first responders can get a notification and be guided to the scene of an incident, and even to the nearest AED machine, so the automatic external defibrillator, if necessary. And this way, more people having a cardiac arrest can get help from bystanders before the arrival of the ambulances. And from our research, we found that this in Europe could lead to approximately 14 to 22,000 lives saved on an annual basis. So literally, lives can be saved with the help of open. And as a final example, let's quickly talk about the environment, which is a topic that's quite close to my heart. And I'm quite curious who of you may have solar panels, because we see them more and more, but there is still such a huge amount of potential there. And actually, there has been research based on open data, actually, on this potential area for solar panels on European rooftops. And open data-based applications that use data on rooftop areas, but also like the slope of the rooftop, as well as solar radiation data, can help advise consumers to use solar panels, and especially calculate the optimal amount of solar panels. And with open data and the smart reuse of it, we can actually increase the solar energy terawatt hours to more than 350 terawatt hours. And this greatly supports the European sustainability goals as well. So these are just a few examples, and in the report there is much more, but it's still just the tip of the iceberg of the benefits that open data can have for society.
Indeed. I really always love to hear about those examples. It makes it so tangible and so real, how open data benefits our society. And if you also as amazed as me by those, feel encouraged to look in the report. There's much more about the impact on our oceans, on our forests, on language technology, so in all sectors. But the report is called The Economic Impact of Open Data, and not the societal or environmental. So Laura, I know you also translated those benefits into actual economic numbers.
Yes, so I can move into that also a little bit. So even though these benefits, let's call them, societal benefits, so saving time, saving lives, saving or helping to preserve the environment, are of great importance. But in the end, also, we would like to see what and how this translates into some kind of economic value. And we were able to do that for several of these examples. So let's start with the cardiac arrest example. So people being able to get help by bystanders faster than the arrival of ambulances, for example. This actually also affects the amount of time they would have to, these people would have to spend in a hospital. So by thinking of it like that, we were able to calculate that the average amount of days less spent in the hospital on average for Europe would result in about 300 to 400,000 healthcare cost savings just with the help of these open data-based applications. For the example that I mentioned on time spent, or time saved, I mean, because it's such a huge amount of time, and we would expect in the ideal world that this time can be actually used to be productive or spend time on work, we could calculate that the time that you would save would translate across Europe again to approximately 740 million labor cost, euros labor cost saved. And for the example of the solar panel increase, we actually translated this into ways in which people would be able to use the solar panel energy as opposed to other types of energy, which will affect their electricity bills. So with that calculation comes that approximately 80 billion euros could be saved Europe-wide on electricity bills because of using solar panel energy as opposed to other types of energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I'm moving on to the next slide. It always takes a moment. And this is a bottom-up approach. And the question is, why are we also having a top-down approach? Because, I mean, this is great. This is super insightful. And what it says, this bottom-up approach, is it exemplifies how value is already created and how this value can, if the whole of Europe would do it, could be of even greater value. So we are talking about a potential here that can be applied to the whole of Europe, not taking into account local differences, of course, but to get the whole picture of the impact of open data, we would need to add all of those small initiatives, and they are countless. So we needed another way to understand the bigger picture of the economic impact of open data for Europe. And here we use a macroeconomic approach, or what we call the top-down approach, where we use typical methodologies of macroeconomics. And we have 3 indicators here, macroeconomic indicators. The one is the market size. Then we looked at the open data employment. And then we looked at specific sectors in more detail. And before I talk a little bit more about what we found out, I think it does make sense to contextualize the macroeconomic approach a little bit. Because first of all, what does impact mean? Impact resulting in market size of open data. When we say, what is the open data market size? I can also tell you there is none. Open data has no market size, just as a tree in the woods has no market size on its own. So when we talk about the open data market size, we talk about the market size of products, services, processes that are realized or enhanced by open data. That makes a little bit of a too long title, so we call it open data market size. But keep in mind that we are looking at those apps and services and products and what their impact on the market is. And they could only be there because of open data or are majorly improved by open data. So this is what we have to take into consideration and remind ourselves, open data, if it's not reused, has no market size. So what is it currently? That's what we're looking at, and what its potential for the future. And also saying that coming up with a potential value is often much easier than finding out what is it actually right now. We try to come as close as possible, but it's always important to take these numbers into account and contextualize them, and don't use them to make a point, especially it's not about the actual numbers here and the euros, but it is about looking at different scenarios, of growth scenarios, contextualizing them, and we need those numbers. We want to have those economic terms to really keep open data on the political agendas, because we want to quantify the benefit. I think most of us, and of you in the audience right now, we are already open data enthusiasts, and we can talk all day about the benefits, but some stakeholders are very much reliant on the economic terms, the tangible monetary benefit. And this is why we try to put these stickers on it, these labels. What is the open data market size? So, and this is why we can understand the market size better. We were working on this in 2019. So the numbers, the latest numbers are from 2019. At that moment, we were not aware that we are having an economic crisis right in front of our noses. So of course, these forecasts and these scenarios, again, must not necessarily come true, but they give a lot of insight on what are different growth scenarios and what do we need to do in order to reach them. This a little bit as a disclaimer, and now about the numbers. We narrowed the current market size in the end of 2019 of open data to around 185 billion euro. And then we had two scenarios for growth. One is more of a baseline where we say open data is just linked to GDP, and as GDP develops, the open data market size will. Well, this baseline was done where we had a really stable GDP. Now the GDP is decreasing massively, and we don't expect open data to decrease in the same range of percentage. So our second scenario, the realistic scenario, is way more usable right now because it's not linked to GDP, but to several individual market characteristics that are important for open data, which is, for example, the broadband, the IT infrastructure in different countries, the open data maturity in different countries. And this scenario, this growth scenario, leads us to a forecast of around 335 billion euro open data market size. And then we looked at employment. So we look at the market size. There needs to be a workforce that creates this productivity, that creates this value. And right now we have approximately, or let's say in 2019, end of 2019, we approximately have a little bit more than 1 million people working on and with open data. And now I hear some of you saying, what does it mean working with open data? In brackets, how we define the open data employment is, of course, people that work with open data, so the developers and the data scientists. Then we have researchers, but there are a lot of people that work thanks to open data. So they work, let's say, in a startup that is only there because of open data, but they might not even work with open data every day. But this is still, in our definition, open data employment. It also includes many people that are here with us right now today that don't work with open data every day, but that strategize open data in government, in the public sector, that research around open data, and also those jobs are included here. So this is open data employment. And also here we are doing a forecast. We did a forecast for 2025, taking into account different market growth factors, and come up with almost 2 million open data employees in 2025. And here I would like to pause for a second and also invite you to think about what does it mean? Because you can say we need more people to create this big market size in 2025. But it also depends very much on individual productivity. So how much value is one employee creating? And in a second, I'll talk about sectors. And what we see there is that the open data reuse differs per sector. and is often in sectors where the productivity per person is very high, the value creation per person is very high. But what we also see is that value creation per person with open data is relatively low still. So there are some inefficiencies, and we all know that open data quality and that the supply is not as perfect as we want. And there are many more factors. So there are inefficiencies in open data reuse. And we expect that those efficiencies, that efficiency gets better, so the value creation per person increases. So the number of employees working on open data is one indicator, but very interesting is the actual value creation. And if the value creation per person increases, this will also increase the market size. And these thoughts are getting interesting when we talk about skills, upskilling our people and the employees to create value. So do we need necessarily a huge workforce to create value out of open data? Probably not, because when we upskill the people working in different positions in the right sectors, then the open data value creation per person already increases and will increase the market size. So the whole topic around skills and capabilities in employment and open data employment will be very relevant. And this is very connected to the topic of open data sectors. So we know that open data value creation differs per sector. Transport is a flagship sector, you might say, where the value creation of open data has a high impact, and it's very visible already. We have a lot of use cases of open data reuse in transport. And we, of course, rely on those sectors to further push the value creation, be loud and proud. But we also see those upcoming sectors that are now in the phase of high digitization, where open data is becoming more and more important, but is maybe not that mature yet, depending. A good example is agriculture being already very mature in open data reuse, the housing sector, and now, of course, the health sector is a big star, let's say, on the open data sky. And we have a lot of potential, or open data has a lot of potential in those sectors. And here we need to make sure, like we said earlier, and you, Mrs. Ubaldi, said as well, the open data needs to fit the purpose in those sectors. Yeah, therefore we were looking a little bit closer at what is important now to increase the value further. And let me move to our last slide, which is the summary of our 7 key learnings. It looks a bit overwhelming, but I'll guide you through. The first one is, like I said, we need to have the right data sets for the right stakeholders in the right sectors. And of course, we have the high value data sets being selected, let's say, as we speak. Many stakeholders are in conversations, which kind of data sets should be high value data sets? How often should they be updated? How granular should they be? For example, for the housing sector. For the health sector, we are right now in this crisis being kind of pushed into the question, what kind of health data do we need, and how are the reuse possibilities here? So the high value datasets initiative and the new open data directive is very promising, and we're all looking forward to the first outputs here. Our second learning is, however, this is very promising, but increasing quality and quantity is just not enough to reach the full potential of open data, which leads us to our key learning number 3. Is also about the reusers that need to be aware, that's first, but also capable of understanding and leveraging the potential, especially in those sectors where open data reuse is more new, where the whole topic of digitization is new, where we can leapfrog and use digitization. That leads me to our key learning number 4. Open data value creation is one part of this whole wide topic of how can we transform our processes in times of automation, digitization, and this is a lengthy process. This is a cultural change, and we have to accept that it's incremental and not overnight, that the impact cannot be measured and observed as loud and clear as we want it to, because it's a transformation of how we work. So using using the digitization movement to piggyback and bring open data in there, it is very important. And this specifically, that's learning number 5, will be sector specific, and that's integral, and having sector specific initiatives, because we have country specific initiatives, we have EU-wide initiatives, but more and more looking at sector specific challenges and how to address them is important. And here building collaborations between the private and the public sector will help us to foster value. 6, and that's my absolute most important learning I think that we need to get from this, is if we want to further push the value and the open principles like transparency, responsibility, fairness, is that we have to look beyond open data. The most incredible value from open data we receive when we combine it with personal data or crowdsourced data. The major use cases like navigation apps, they combine it with crowdsourced data. What Laura told us about saving lives, many apps benefit from combining open data with personal data on our location, because how can someone find me if I don't share my location? So being aware and awake, when is it valuable to share my personal information and when do I want to protect my personal information? And I'm really happy that we have GDPR because it helps us a lot. So combining those different kinds of data will really unleash its value. And the 7th key learning, our last key learning, is that for the different challenges, specific challenges, we need to look at the right approach of using open data and shared data to find the right approach, find the right data, and then make sure that this approach, including the right stakeholders, is ethical, sustainable, and fit for purpose. These are our learnings, and really happy to share them with you. And for now, thank you very much for being with us. It was a pleasure sharing our enthusiasm and our results. And now I believe we have, yes, some time for questions.
Thank you very much, Laura and Esther. And I would like now, I suggest that before we go to the next speaker, of course, we check our chat and Q&A box, and we have one question for you. So the question goes like this: have you done any analysis on negative or positive externalities from open data spillover effects, please? So can you give us answer, please?
I checked if I can read this question as well, but I don't see it. So the question is if we have positive, negative impact, so also the negative impact I see of spillover effects of open data. Is that the question?
Yes, yes. Have you done any analysis on these two, negative or positive externalities from open data? Yes, exactly.
I see. So in our report, we also make it clear that we focus on the, let's say, the positive impact. Although this is, of course, when we talk about positive and negative, this is a matter of perspective. If products get better, other products are moved from the market, and some people find that great and some people don't find that great. So what's positive and negative? And we try to take the European stance and see what's best for the European economy. So when we talk about the impact, we try to not judge the impact, but focus on what is positive for the whole of Europe, which then, of course, is not always positive for every individual. Talking about spillover effects, what comes to mind, of course, is health data in pharmaceutical companies, for example, if we have spillover, but what also comes to mind is we want to do that for Europe. If we are spilling over to the, let's say, the big tech companies in America, is that what we want? Are these the companies that we want to to have benefits from the open data from Europe. And this is always, I think, a tricky topic, because we don't want to prevent anyone from having access to this open data and everyone can benefit from it. Is that in the idea of strengthening the European economy? Well, that depends. But what we can make sure is that this open data, when selecting it and selecting the way of publishing it, the granularity, the timing,
Can we hear you, Esther? Esther, are you here with us? Laura, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm still with you. I believe Esther's connection broke.
Okay.
But I think what she mentioned in her answer so far is indeed very much true. And I was also thinking in terms of the positive negative effects, just to give you a very minor example of that. For example, the less time that we would spend on train platforms waiting on a train with the use of open data-based apps would be positive, but it would be less positive, would be negative for the, let's say, the shops in the station that kind of depend on people spending around some time to do some purchases or whatnot. That's just a very, very quick and dirty example of that. But I believe that Esther kind of mostly has addressed the question, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Laura, can you be with us just for one more question, which came to the Q&A forum? So, are there a clear borders between the personal data and economic value create? This is the question.
Yes, yeah, I'm just trying to think about what the idea behind this question is. Oh, the other one dropped. Well, yes, we always try to create a clear border between the personal data as it is used right now, but we want to hint at the possibility of trying to become more open, less stressed about any kind of personal data. And of course, there are different extents to which we want to open up personal data. Like Esther said, with all the GDPR regulations that we have to adhere to. But in another way, it might be able to, in some way or form, maybe not now, maybe a little bit in the near future, to find ways of making personal data to some way or form usable to be connected with fully open data. I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but
I would thank you anyway. If that was not the answer, I suppose that the person who sent us this question will maybe send another question. So I would like really to thank you on your presentation for both of you. Really, we are grateful to hear this presentation. And before we go to the next speaker, just let me check. Yes, this was everything for now. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Esther. Unfortunately, the connection broke, but anyway.
It's the difficulties that we have to adhere to in these difficult times. But on my behalf and also on Esther's behalf, thank you very much for giving us the stage to talk about this. And I'm hoping that we can discuss it a little bit further, maybe later in the conference. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. And now, following the program, we are moving to a concrete project. So welcome to next key speakers, Alex Yakulin, technology innovator, data science professor, artificial intelligence researcher, and Luka Renko, founder of Sledilnik.org, investor and coach at Silicon Gardens Fund. Together, they are representing the contribution data excellence and experience of the COVID-19 tracker project. Luka Renko and Alex Yakulin, are you here with us? Please say something.
Hello, this is
Hello.
Alex.
Hello, Alex. And Luca Renko, are you here with us? Luca?
Okay, I just got controls. Yes.
Okay, okay. Hello to both of you. If I may ask Mr. Luca Renko, we cannot imagine what it means to be a part of Talking Tomcat team. Can you give us a hint?
Oh, it was a fast ride with a lot of data challenges on the way too.
Great. And now from this hint to your project, so please give us your presentation about this COVID-19 tracker project. Please, the word is yours.
Alex, can you share the presentation?
1 second.
Just a bit of preview for you. Okay, so let's start with COVID-19 Sledilnik project, which is actually a tracking project for COVID-19 in Slovenia. It started out of my personal need to actually get a better understanding about the data about the COVID-19 spread in Slovenia. I was checking official data sources for Slovenia, which were on one side thorough, daily updated data points about the attraction of the virus spread in Slovenia, you know, by region, by municipalities. There were plenty of media reports in the first week. However, you know, I was missing kind of a good overview of the situation because, you know, just daily data points about the state doesn't give you much about the progress of the epidemic in Slovenia. So I started, next slide. I started to collect this data in a small spreadsheet, you know. I just opened the Google Docs for myself to start tracking this daily snapshot of the data. You know, they were publishing it at 2 o'clock every day. I just entered all the stuff in, you know, I collected all the data, tried to understand the kind of factors, the growth numbers, understand the location data where this is spreading, and there were also reports of the sources of the virus spread. Later on, you know, there were plenty of data, particularly from the media, about the individual cases, because, you know, everybody was hot on the topic. We were, let's say, in quotes, lucky to have quite some initial spreaders which were very successful in spreading the disease, which kind of raised the alert level, you know, which was really good of the media, of the public, and so on. So we tracked individual cases. We got, from these individual cases, we got some initial outbreaks localized. You know, there were like 3 large outbreaks going on in 3 different areas, regions in Slovenia. And this was actually how the first week of epidemic looked like for me. You know, I was just tracking my kind of daily numbers and just trying to get a grasp on the development. Then, you know, I kind of spread this, you know, in Twitter discussions. Maybe next slide. I shared this my private Google Docs document to some guy on a Twitter, you know, just to make a point, because they were quoting some wrong numbers, some factors of growth and so on. So I shared it, and, you know, I immediately got struck that, you know, there were plenty of anonymous users coming from Twitter now on this document. I was just seeing them as anonymous users in the tracking of the Google spreadsheets. Quickly, some people like Alex shared this document as a reference and asked others to start contributing to the document, because everybody, there were kind of group of people there that kind of wanted to explore or better understand the development of the epidemic in Slovenia. So this resulted in, you know, some of those anonymous users getting to the faces. So we got faces that were actually contributing individual data points. So like spread in particular local areas, or identifying more information about the individual cases, correcting information or quotes that I were putting into the documents and so on. So this open data that I shared, you know, immediately got a lot of contributions. It was in the first week of publishing, it was at least 25, 30 people actively contributing data points into the document. Just as a comment in the document, I was basically playing an editor on the document, invited some key people already in to help me out and so on. Then next week, kind of things escalated to the next slide. There were people already bringing new ideas, you know, new big ideas what to do with the data. Because what happened is when epidemic grew up to the level that they were unable to track individual cases, the government decided that they will start testing differently, not everybody with symptoms and so on, but more directed tests, primarily to the people that are hospitalized. We kind of needed new methodology, new data model. So immediately there were people that kind of forked my table, started to work on their improved model. There were people contributing first charts about the data that we were collecting there. And based on that, you know, we kind of understood that, you know, this is becoming something more than just a data source. It's actually a playground for people to develop new ideas, to develop new models, to develop new results out of this data set. Next slide. So, you know, just to see how everything developed in 1 month, you know, so my first public sharing of the document was on March 11th. So the first case in Slovenia was March 4th. So in a week, I shared basically the first data set publicly on Twitter as an answer to some discussion. Then in less than a week, there were already so many contacts I was running through Twitter, through Facebook, through email, contributing ideas through comments in the document that actually I couldn't bear with all these communication flows. So there the idea came to start a community around it. We opened a Slack community. And the first day we got to like 35 people, just the people that were already then communicating, got on board, you know, got a channel where we could communicate and so on. So then the first big result of this improved communication was because of the change of the methodology on tracking, on testing, we decided that we need to focus better on the tracking hospitalized patients, which were not regularly reported by the government. It was not part of their regular reporting. So we said we have to develop our own model. We need to collect this data from the hospitals directly. We have to collect this data from the media. We have to have a back channel to the hospitals that don't publicly expose this data. And this is how our table of the hospitalized patient actually started. Next day, you know, some people joined that, this slide, started the website out of it because they wanted to have something better than a Google chart and a Google spreadsheet to describe more about the cooperation, to have a GitHub source code repository and so on. Then we were challenging government, the communication office of the government about some data that was differently reported by the different government services. And out of this, we started a communication with Ms. Bejovic. She's leading the expert group that is consulting the Slovenian government in the fight for the COVID-19 epidemic in Slovenia. So she was really immediately willing to exchange all the data sets that she had. So we got all the structured data that she was getting daily. We started to look into it, clarified where the mismatches in the data set actually came out, why the different reporting was out. And we were immediately asked if we could help them out with presenting hospital capacity for the Ministry of Health. so that they could better plan the hospital capacity through the world. So we presented special view on our website, special charts that were actually helping them to plan the COVID-19 hospitals and so on. And we exchange also our models that we were developing in our community, because we have a modeling group that was working on different approaches, how to model the epidemic. And we shared this information with the expert group at the Ministry of Health, so they could actually envision, you know, how we are seeing the further development. And then on April 6th, we also decided that our models are good enough that we could actually publicize them. So this all kind of happened in less than a month, more or less, from the first case. And it built up a community behind it of really data scientists, experts, software developers, people that are working on communication and different really engaged people, I would say. That's the really key of the community. Next. So where we are today is, you know, we have an active member community. Currently, this is just the data from our Slack community. We have 78 people weekly active, so contributed at least some posts, some data sets. What we are best known for are our charts, which are constantly developing. So we were introducing new models, so like how to track recovered patient better, because this was not publicly announced by the public sources. So we developed our own model, which are me now validating with them. Then we had these hospital charts where we track all the ins and outs for the hospital. So we know how many people are coming in, how many are on the respirators and intensive care unit. We developed our map here, where we actually can show to every citizen in Slovenia where the new cases are coming from, where the which municipalities are actually now not contagious anymore, at least from the perspective of the confirmed cases. And we are constantly developing different data models. You know, so we now already have like more than 10 different data models for different purposes. And these data models are then used for models, predictions, developing the content for FAQ and learning, and to share with the public through social media and through events like this one. Next one. So just a quick overlook on the architecture of how we work on the data sets. So we still kept our Google Docs sheet as our main data source for the model, because lots of cases we are getting data which are partial, not complete. So we need to combine the sources to get to the complete kind of overlook on the particular data points. For example, hospitalizations, we are using at least 3 data sources to collect everything, to then create a model which is consistent and we can work on. So we import data from the National Institute of Public Health. We get data sources directly from the Ministry of Health. We combine this with public sources like media. We get this into Google Docs sheet model, and we also convert automatically with some scripts some data models directly to comma separated values, which are then used by modeling team to develop our models or third-party models. We have a REST API for easier access further on. So on REST API, we have our own web page, and we are also hosting embedded pages for some of the third parties, like the University Clinical Center of Ljubljana is using our embedded charts, Slovenian press agency, and 24 hours portal. Also, we are a data source for many other portals and many other modeling groups that are working on the data set about the COVID-19. Next one. So the data source, I think it's important is to clarify, is just a base for the real innovation. And I think it's important that data actually provides a better overview on the situation and how we are positioned worldwide. So I will now give my work to Alex to explain further on how we look at the data excellence in general.
Okay, let me unmute myself and reshare. This is data. You're seeing a map of the world, but how useful is this? You know, if you think about it, just telling you that there are people living in Europe and in North America, it doesn't actually tell you what's the relative risk in every individual country. So on the right, you get a slightly better presentation where you have less overlap, but it still doesn't really tell you anything really actionable, right? So this is data, and you can have very high quality data, but it's not actually useful. So imagine you live in Slovenia, and this is the website that the government's providing around COVID. And maybe it's not that useful, but it points to Sledilnik, and this is what you get in Sledilnik. You get a picture of the cases, of the new cases in Slovenia per district. Okay, and the color is also different. Like, there are a couple of them that are reddish, and there are a couple of them that are white. In the white areas, there have been no cases reported. Doesn't mean they didn't happen, but they just weren't reported. The ones that have had reports are colored in proportion to the percentage of the population, right? So here we're showing something that is letting people know the relative danger they're exposed to right now in terms of active cases around them. Okay, so why is this good? It's good because the data is presented in a way that makes it easy to act upon, right? So that's the methodology that we've been developing, and that is featured and applied in Sledilnik. We're calling it the Kuma data loop, and it's inspired by the work of Colonel Boyd that developed something called the OODA loop, which is basically telling you it's not so important what's your quality of data or your quality of analysis or your quality of decision making. What's important is that all of them, the capture, the understanding, the modeling, and the action are tied together in a loop, and that the loop is spinning as fast as possible, that it goes as deep as possible, that it's complete and doesn't have a gap, and that it covers everything that's relevant, right? So if you do all of this together, you get data excellence. So why does speed matter? So if you think about it, when you have a high rate of growth of COVID-19, every day we've got like a 40% increase in numbers. But if you look at how the data is actually being processed, it takes 1 or 2 days for the results to actually become known. But every day increases the maximum number of cases by 40%. What is 40%? Like, imagine you have 1,000 cases. Well, it's going to be 1,400 cases because of 1 day's delay. And if you think about it, the other thing that's important is depth. The most successful nations have offered deep data. They haven't offered aggregate statistics for that particular day. I think we're, especially in Europe, we're obsessing way too much around privacy, which, right, I mean, there is a human right about privacy, but there's also human rights about safety and being able to stay alive. So we need to keep these things in proportion. And in circumstances like COVID-19, we need to favor depth and speed more than, say, privacy. So the examples from Taiwan, you know, the ministry that's in charge of the epidemic is actually publishing even things like when did a particular patient become symptomatic? You know, what's their age? What's their gender? Where are they? Where do they come from? Where do they live? In Singapore, they track where did they get infected, so you can see basically what the clusters are, right? So no one in Europe, you know, perhaps except for Iceland, has really offered the type of data depth that would make a difference, let alone data speed. Like the ECDC still collects and reports data on a daily basis, meaning we're going to see a 40% increase in the maximum number of cases, you know, which is not just a few, it's a lot, because it takes time for everything to happen. So in a way, we have this paradigm shift, you know, like even though, you know, in the 1600s, people looked at paper and they published paper, they had this slow cycle, right? So the thing is, we haven't really changed it, you know, with digitalization. Even though we have publications that are digital, they're still like documents that are being sent around on a daily basis. We have data that are basically spreadsheets that are being sent around, uploaded, and emailed. And we've got models that are basically pieces of code that everyone's keeping on their own computer. I think we need something much faster. And this is what I call the interactive science, where data is actually visible to everyone right away. Where publications are basically websites and dashboards that get updated in real time, and where models are collaborative and everyone's being able to change them, edit them, review them. And you know, this way we get the cycle size of a minute. We can react so much more quickly, meaning we save you know, the 2 days delay that is now inevitable, meaning that we make the size, the total size of the epidemic half the size that it would be otherwise, simply by being smart about data. So I mentioned speed and depth, but we also have closure and breadth. And this is the other thing that we did around Slovenija. We did not just focus on the technical parts of data and, you know, data excellence, but also on the organizational aspects. So to get closure, we need to close the loop. It means we need to collect the data, but we also need to involve folks to be able to understand it. So we internally develop visualizations that help people understand data faster and better. We have engaged modeling experts that work on properly filtering out the irrelevant you know, factors. Like there is this funny post about Swedes being so considerate that they don't even die on the weekends. Well, you know, on the weekends, the data is moving more slowly. That's what's causing, you know, those oscillations. You know, the delay I spoke about, 2 days, like it's 2 days on a weekday, and on a weekend, it might be 4 days. So the next step is actually decision makers, and we've engaged decision makers so that they can actually use our work as fast as it happens, so they don't have to wait another day before a report is prepared and published. And yes, it does potentially increase the odds of errors, but this is why we keep that loop going. And if it's a fast loop, errors also get addressed very quickly. The second aspect of building excellence is the breadth. So, you know, for example, today we've been debating the new serological analysis of you know, Slovenija, and that requires skills that we previously didn't really have that much inside the team. So we brought in you know, microbiologists and other folks that do testing, and they understand the whole testing process and the ELISA protocols and similar, right? So we need to close the loop so that the loop churns as fast as possible, and we need to also increase the breadth to bring you know, all the relevant experts with relevant data and the relevant understanding that's needed to have good decisions and good actions. And you know, the final aspect is that we need quality in everything. So this was an invite based process. So we invited the people that we respected who had the best work we knew, and many of them responded and engaged. That's in part what is the basis for the relative success and relevance of Sledilnik. So to summarize data excellence as a process is that we have this data loop, meaning that we work with a data technical group and a data meaning group of sorts. We try to spin the circle as fast as we can, both in terms of the technical process of moving from data to understanding to modeling and to decisions, but also by bringing all the relevant experts into a community that works collaboratively. And the mission that is emerging from all of this is that we're developing and recognizing excellence in collection, distribution, and application of data to benefit life. This way, by building data excellence, we solve many of the problems that had been raised by previous speakers around, yes, we have data, but are people actually using it? That's the key part. We need the data excellence process to properly create loops in different domains, in different applications for governments, for communities, for companies, to properly utilize data to build proper data-driven institutions. So the Sledilnik team is developing and supporting data infrastructure, and we're becoming good at actually getting organized as a community to create something like that whenever there is a need, whenever there is an important challenge to be tackled. So here I'm going to conclude the presentation and invite you for questions.
Thank you very much, Luca Renko and Alex Yakulin. And I think we have some questions on our chat, but I think that already one answer came because one of our listeners asked for the, Mrs. Ubaldi asked for the Slack channel link, and I think that we already have this answer. And one of our listeners asked for your copy of PowerPoint presentations. I think this will also be arranged afterwards. So there are no further questions for now. Maybe just to check Q&A. There is one question. Just let me read it. Looking at the spreadsheet about data disclosure between different countries, it looks that we are at dark, talking UK as example, comparing to the others. How do you evaluate the politics system influence over that difference? Maybe you can give us a short answer on this one, please.
I cannot really speak that much about what's happening in the UK. The thing that makes the biggest difference is when you bring everyone together. When you connect the community, when you close the loop. And if you don't close the loop, if you're relying on expert groups that don't include all the relevant stakeholders, you're going to get worse results. The good thing about potential, small country like Slovenia is that it's very easy to get all the key people in a room because it's a small country. In a bigger country, it's much harder to synchronize. So I wouldn't just, point fingers. Small countries have certain advantages. Most of the successful cases of COVID-19 response have been in small countries, like Taiwan, like South Korea, like New Zealand, Iceland. In a bigger country, you need a little more skill and excellence to be able to close the loop in a bigger society.
Thank you very much. We have one more question, so stay with us. It's a question on our chat channel. So from Arturo Rivera, OECD. and the question goes, in relation to your concluding points for the way forward, how would you relate those to government's digital preparedness from a data governance perspective?
So I would say that data governance is great, but for real excellence, you need to be able to create and close loops. Create and close data loops. So whenever there is a challenge, whenever there is a problem you want as a government to address, you need to actually build a loop. You cannot just capture the data. That's not enough. You need to do the whole circle. So that's our proposal. Is whenever you want actually the data to be properly applied, you also need to build a loop around it. And that loop is actually going to evaluate the quality of data, is going to create the value that's needed for sustainable long-term data capture, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that we will arrange afterwards with all your PowerPoint presentations, so that I think that we will get everything after this conference. Thank you for this answer. Your presentation was very interesting. We are getting comments on our chat channel. So thank you very much for now. Just let me shortly check Q&A channel. Okay, no, there are no further questions. So thank you very much, Alex, and thank you very much, Luca.
Thank you.
Now, as I said, we have no pauses. I know that you would maybe like one short, but no, we are moving forward. So international cooperation to promote the use of open data. Presentation will be done by Aleš Pevc, who is here with me. And Petar Medica. Mr. Aleš Pevc, the Creative Technologies and New Business Model Consultant at Technology Park Ljubljana, will present ODEON, Open Data for European Innovating Project, Interreg Mediterranean Project, and Mr. Petar Medica, Project Manager in Technology Park Ljubljana, will present Data Economy in the Alpine Space Project, which is DEAS project, Interreg Alpine Space Project. So I will suggest maybe Aleš and Petar to take word. So international cooperation to promote the use of open data. Please, the word is yours. Aleš, Petar.
Hi, hello. Hello, Katja. It's Petar. Aleš, you have the word.
So I would like to share my screen with you. Thank you, Katja. As you already mentioned, I strongly believe that for promotion and for the rise of using of data, of open data, is really important, it's really crucial, also the international cooperation. So Barbara and Esther and Laura already said there is a lot of opportunity in open data. In the prognosis for the next few years are very optimistic. And Sierra say we will need this innovation, we will need this approach in the next period, because we are fighting another battle. So COVID-19 battle will end, but the job and looking for job time will come. So for that reason, I'm very happy that we are in international cooperation in open data project. So ODEON is one of the projects who have focused on, of course, on developing some test models and tools to support of using of open data, mostly for open data hubs. So for that reason, the open data hubs are some kind of clusters who are established by the SMEs, startups, and research organization, of course, also some other clusters and Chamber of Commerce, to develop the innovation product and services in the aim of the entrepreneurial marketing and social value of open data. So to establish this new value and new business models and everything about how can we use open data in a different approach and in a different way. And this is one of the crucial things, I think, in this period we are waiting for. So for that reason, one of the main results of Odeon project will be Open Data Hub platform. On this platform, which is a result of many of capitalization of make project and is focused on 3 thematic areas: green and blue growth, and of course creative and cultural industries. In this platform, you could find some administrative training and some other tools for awareness and capacity building. And to assist hub and tools and SMEs and startups and their innovations and their initiatives, and to develop some cooperation between different countries and between different stakeholders. So for that reason, we can see that open data platform, which we are built in the Odeon project, have more than 5,700 results about open data sets. And of course, you can see that these are really you can use these open data for some kind of business approach, of some kind of research. They are gathering this data from Mediterranean countries, from 8 different Mediterranean countries. And of course, you can also see that we established already 8 local regional hubs in which you can find some information about where can you get data, how can we support these SMEs and startups. And of course, you can find also some services which can help also SMEs, also startups to grow their business, to make some value of their social innovation, of their data innovation, and of course to help the hubs which are establishing in a way that they can be a better organization to connect all data, to help organizations to get better data, to reuse data, and so on. So for that reason is these services and tools are also available for the other hubs which are already included or maybe want to be included in this open data platform. And for that reason, I would like to invite you to be a part of this open data initiative and join us in our hub, and maybe you can find some really good data for you, or maybe you can share some data with us that we can maybe find some option to cooperation. So this will be the date for this portal, and I give word my colleague Peter now, who will present the project DEAS.
So thank you, Aleš. I will now share my screen with you. Can you unshare it, or how do we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not sure if you can see it now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So from the sea to the mountains. So I will be presenting you very briefly an Alpine Space project DEAS about the data economy Alp strategy to stimulate participation, competitiveness, and new businesses in the Alpine space. Yeah. So just a second. Okay, it's better now. So yeah, so we know that Alpine space has about 80 million of inhabitants, plus a challenging geography. So that's why it has specific needs for providing valuable, on-time and quality service, information service to the population, to the tourists and different organizations working in this zone. One source of valuable services can be also open data, if of course, if elaborated and packed in a proper manner. The focus of our projects is the existing data sets and APIs, and the creation of APIs for the creation of new applications based on data, on open data already available, and from identified demand for the citizens of the Alpine space. So we are hopefully involving all quadruple helix actors in the project, and each each kind of actor will get some benefits from it. So we shall support and assist SMEs to create new services with better access to open data, and by creation of APIs to develop those services. We shall equip and build new competencies of intermediaries, of business support organizations to better support private sectors in exploiting the open data. Of course, we will try to contribute to the raising of knowledge and awareness of public administration, to plan dedicated schemes to support local actions and straighten the impact of the data economy in the Alpine space. And finally, and hopefully, people living in the Alpine space will benefit from new services that hopefully will make their day better. So this is the work plan for the project. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. So currently we are identifying the needs and expectations for new services in the three sectors that we find the most specific or in the Alpine space. These are mobility, environment, and tourism. These identifications of needs and expectations will be followed by platform development, training activities, APIs, creation of APIs, pilot actions, and resulting in the Alpine space strategy for better exploitation of the open data. So as said, we are currently identifying the needs and expectations for new products and services that can improve our everyday life. We just published a survey focused on our needs in the fields of mobility, environment, and tourism that can be addressed by exploiting open data through and development of new mobile and web applications. So you're kindly invited to take your local survey, or you can take a general survey in English language. So we also agreed with the organizers of this event that the links will be sent to all participants in the follow-up email or published on the LinkedIn page in the next day. So I really hope you will take this survey, and it will just take 10 minutes of your time. Here are some details about the project. So as you can see, we actually started the project a few months ago. We're kind of still in the inception phase at the beginning. The project will run for the next 2 years. We are 12 partners from 5 different Alpine space countries, and Regione Veneto being the lead partner of the project. So more information about the project is available on the website, and you can reach me if you have any questions. You can reach me either via email or LinkedIn, or what's your favorite communication channel. So thank you again. It was a really brief presentation, but it's more or less that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Hvala. Thank you very much, Peter and Aleš. And now I would suggest not a coffee break, but a break with our survey. Just let me briefly check. No, we have no questions and answers for now. but I would suggest to go to our chat anyway, where you will be able to find new survey, just to take a short break to prepare ourselves to a panel discussion. So here it is. Please go and answer the question. What would you do with open data if you had superpowers? Now we have superpowers, we can just spread our hands and we have superpowers, but no, answer this question, and again in about 1 minute we will have your answers, please. So go to chat, give us the answer, and then Aleš, I hope you are here with us, Aleš Veršič. I will ask you to give us a short comment, but first we have superpowers and what would we do with open data? So are we together? Are your precious answers already coming? Please say yes. Imagine yourself as Arni, Rocky. Imagine yourself as, I don't know, who? Aleš, Mateja, help me. Who has superpowers? Arnold Schwarzenegger, Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone, I don't know,
Norris.
Lundgren, I don't know who else. Your answers are here. Okay. Just take a few seconds. Superpowers, open data and superpowers. Let's connect these two. Give us answers in our chat channel. Great. Chuck Norris, yes, thank you, Aleš Veršič. You will also give us comment on this one, so be prepared. Thank you. Can you hear me anyway? It's so quiet.
Yes, Katja, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Aleš, are you prepared to give us a short comment on this, I don't know, Jackie Chan question?
So we have some of the superpowers people with us, and I like this one. Start a new trend, help poor continents, data miner. I would say, yeah, the data is the source for the new society, for the digital society.
It's definitely new superpower, if you can say so. And before I leave you the floor, if I may say so, because you will, Aleš Veršič, you will host the panel discussion on how open data assists development of economy and society. I would like to say thank you for your cooperation. I see that you have many ideas, and we will surely discuss about superpowers and open data furthermore. But now, please, Aleš, the word is yours to introduce your your precious guests and to introduce your, let's say, discussion panel. So, please, Aleš.
Okay, thank you. Katja, thanks. Dear guests, participants, speakers, and colleagues, just let me introduce myself as your today host. I am Aleš Veršič from the Ministry of Public Administration and head of the Open Data Portal. I hope we have all the participants on this round table. And in the next 45 minutes, with the help of the colleagues, I will try to bring you closer to the how open data contributes to the development of the economy and society. We have 6 speakers. Let me check if all of them are here. I can see Marko Grobelnik. Let's see, Emilia is also here. Peter Vosner is also. I'm missing also Urška Stac-Peceni and Yuri Loka, Mateusz Sasserman. Are they here? Okay, Yuri is also here. Okay.
Urška raised her hand, so they are everyone is here with us.
Okay, so then I will start with the first speaker, Emilia Stoimenova-Duh, Hello, Emilia.
Hi.
You're head of the Public-Private People Partnership Digital Innovation Hub. And you are collecting currently the needs and priorities of Slovenian municipalities in the field of digitization with Association of Municipalities and Towns of Slovenia. The data collected will help the Ministry of Public Administration of Slovenia to implement and above all, more efficiently plan future digitalization measures. I have two questions for you. Why should municipalities open their data as soon as possible? And how can open data help the future sustainable development of municipalities? Emilia, the word is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Aleš, and thanks a lot for to the previous speakers. It was great to listen to them, and they gave me a lot of food for thought. So I will try to be as short as possible, although these questions require a lot of debate. So nowadays, not only in the cities, but also in smaller towns, an overwhelming amount of data is being created by both public but also private concerns, and this is happening on an ongoing basis. Usually this data is stored beyond the reach of the most people, so it's secured either on government or privately owned databases, and many times also on individual electronic devices. So the types and the depth of this data is increasing also because of the technological solutions we are using daily in our lives and are used also in the towns and the cities. So the potential advantages of the data collection on such scale are of course beyond question, and we heard a lot on this earlier today. But although the data collection is the most difficult part of any investigation, the majority of global data is yet unseen, and because of that also unused. So limiting the number of people who can access this data necessarily limits the number of problems which this data can be applied. So in most cases, it prevents access to the people who are best able to apply this data to solve solutions to the problems. So of course, the data is to open the answer to the question is to open this data. And because of that, open data can help to accelerate the development not only of cities, but also of towns by connecting the people who are most capable of creating smart cities solutions with the data needed to generate and support them. So just to name a few areas where open data can be used within municipalities, it's transparency and accountability, then performance management, transportation and infrastructure, resilient city planning, then the use of Internet of Things in smart cities, civic engagement, and so on and so on. So about the second question was about the future sustainable development of municipalities. So open data, the World Bank has published a very nice paper about how open data can help the sustainable development on more general level, but this also fits for the municipalities as well. So because of open data, municipalities can foster the economic growth and job creation, so they can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the services offered within the municipalities. Then of course increase transparency, accountability, and citizen participation. So here open data can help to inform evidence-based policy making and design of municipal services that are offered to the citizens. And last but not least, to facilitate better information sharing between the citizens and the municipality. I think you're
Emilia,
muted.
Yeah, thank you. Emilia, thank you for your view of this topic. Maybe just one sentence about the project you're now dealing for the Ministry of Public Administration.
So about this tool we were building. So this is a project that it was developed in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Administration and the Association of Municipalities and Towns. So to better plan the future measures, not only in this funding perspective, but also in the future, we wanted to see from the citizens and the municipalities themselves what are their priorities about digitalization. So first we wanted to see where are their problems, and then we wanted to see how digital technologies can help them with COVID-19. So we did a study. We had also workshops in 10 municipalities around, 10 areas that covered many municipalities in Slovenia. And after that, we had a questionnaire that was sent to all the municipalities. So the results of this questionnaire were analyzed, and now we're representing them on a tool on our webpage. And there you can see for different municipalities, for smaller, bigger ones. So what are their top priorities? What are the available solutions already existing there? So this tool is not useful only for the Ministry of Public Administration to plan the future measures, but also it's useful for other municipalities to see whether there are some solutions already existing and how they can collaborate together. So today we heard a lot about how collaboration is important, and here is the same case as well.
Okay, Emilia, thank you. Can you put the link on the chat to this website?
Of course.
Okay, so our next speaker, because I would like to say the ladies first, is Urška Star-Speceni. Hello, Urška. Since you are involved in tourism, you probably also like to travel. And being a mother of 3 children, organizing a trip is quite a challenge. I assume that you also use this experience in your current work. And you're now currently working on the development of Tourism 4.0 in your work. In doing so, you focus on spreading the technologies from Industry 4.0 into tourism to create a future that we all want to live in. Access to the relevant data is certainly also one of the cornerstones when it comes to Tourism 4.0. And I have 2 questions also for you. What difficulties do you face in this work? Is data available in appropriate format to facilitate the transformation to the Tourism 4.0? And also in the light of COVID-19 and the changing patterns of travel and also the functioning of our society, the transition to Tourism 4.0 is all the more necessary. How do you see the future in this segment of society? Urška?
Aleš, thank you for this fantastic introduction. Thank you for the invitation to being part of this exciting discussion here with these interesting experts. Maybe just a few information about us. Actor is a high-tech company. It's an owner of a private supercomputer structure. And we jumped into tourism sector like 2-3 years ago with the vision to use the experiences from Industry 4.0 in tourism. The knowledge we gained in making key enabling technologies in Industry 4.0 available to SMEs, also in tourism, this is the idea. So we are leading the largest R&D public funding project focused on tourism in the history of Slovenia with all major universities. We are also lead of the largest demo project with the largest tourist service providers, and also European projects in the Black Sea area where we are focused on the assessment of the impact of tourism. The main idea, just to get what is Tourism 4.0 is, the main idea that we follow is that in all our activities, we put the tourist in the center. So not the tourist in the center, not the tourist is the king, but the local inhabitant and his quality of life is. So everything we build, whatever we do, we put the focus on this the quality of life of local inhabitants. Of course, we are facing the challenge with information. There are many of them spread around somewhere and somehow, like in some formats. And what we try to do is that we are developing models and tools which help both the collecting of information and then this magic process of transforming them into valuable and rich data. For example, one of these tools is TIM, Tourism Impact Model. It's a tool for modeling and optimization of the tourist impact on a local ecosystem. Just to get the idea, like local inhabitants or tourist service providers or authority, everyone has an own subjective perception of the reality, what tourism, what impact of tourism is. And with this tool, we want to bring like real data in the perception of this impact of tourism. To sharpen this picture, you know, so everyone gets the real data and make them strategic, data-driven strategic decision planning. Your question about the future and the COVID, we see tourism as a horizontal layer which connects like all impacts, all layers of the society. And as we can see now in this crisis, and we hope and we believe that government and all levels of authorities will take this chance and introduce tools which will help to take this quick, complex, and flexible decision. For example, to take the next wave of the COVID-19, do we really need to close everything? Maybe we can build this ecosystem in a modular way, measure individual parts, and then simulate, take the data, use open data, see the added value of the open data, and then see maybe we can just close one part of something and see the effect. So this is what we are trying to do with these tools. And we really believe that now tourism is now at 0 point. It was never in the history of, people are always traveling. And now we can measure really what it means if the tourism is 0, the negative effects of it also, not the positive, because not everyone is happy that nothing is happening. We see the negative effect. And then when we start again, how to build really this sustainable tourism. So this is what we are doing. And the role of open data here is crucial. So.
Thank you. Maybe just another sub question is, you can see now, because of the COVID-19 situation, people in India finally saw the Himalaya, people in Venice see that fish is coming back in the Venice. So this could be a good starting point for, as you mentioned before, to take care of the local population, because the tourism has a huge impact on the Venice example, because people is going out. Ljubljana is also going in this direction. So maybe this could be tourism, good starting point of tourism 4.0.
Maybe I can mention, we actually started an initiative with EARTH. This is Alliance of innovation like experts for innovation worldwide. And Tourism 4.0 initiative is called tourismfromzero.org. And there we started to collect in a similar way as Emilia was mentioning, just from the very beginning with basic questions: what are the problems, what are the challenges in an area? We are providing different codes. For example, Ljubljana, the city of Ljubljana, is using more codes for each stakeholders to see in a simple way what is the situation now and how to connect in this unique situation in the own ecosystem, and how to build it from bottom up. And you get the ideas. We are sharing the information on the website, so we can compare what are the challenges in one region in Slovenia or in other part of the world, and to see these new ideas how to build actually this new local tourism or the benefit of it. Of course, this is one of the direction which we are going.
So, Urška, thank you for your view on this topic. Our next speaker will be now Yuri Lokar. We will now shifting from the tourism to the business entities. Hello, Yuri. You work in a company where you deal with your clients' credit scores, among other things. With your team, you are responsible for obtaining and processing the data for Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this is, I think, a very important role in the credit assessment process. And I have also two questions for you. What problems do you face in your work? Do you notice any differences between the countries in which you receive the data? And looking at your experience, what would you recommend about opening these databases for the future?
Yeah, well, we have all sorts of problems every day, from technical ones to legal ones, and at the end also with the price of the data. So countries are not so different. They are only in different evolutionary stages. So we as a business, we always try to challenge institutions to provide us with a stable data feed, and in some way also help them to set the right price for the data. So this why we are seeing institutions as our partner on this path, So.
Okay, but any recommendation about for the future, because this data is crucial for a company. We listened today that data from the colleagues from the Capgemini, the data themselves, they are not so important. Then the services, the products which is created with this data is the added value.
Providing, making this data available is very crucial for all of us. We want to have them as much as possible because we cannot predict the need for this data until we are able to access them and try to sell them on the market, you know. So to have this data accessible would create for sure new opportunities and maybe also solve many challenges that we have from security ones, technical ones, and also to set the right price of the data, because we at this point don't know what can be sold on the market. So we are all for open data.
Okay. Here maybe any additional remarks or experience you would to share with us?
As it was many times mentioned in these presentations, it is very crucial to speed up the process of acquiring data and to open up, because once the rumor goes out that some data will be available, well, the potential consumer of the data get impatient. So it would be very nice from the institutions to be able to speed up these processes of opening the data to the public. So
okay, so this already mentioned, yes, Alex, that this speed data cycle to be almost near the real data. But it's also interesting because when Elon Musk started to selling the Tesla car, they just show the prototype and the people is still waiting for this car for 1 year. So it was, let's say, a different story, but still, yeah, I understand if somebody says that there will be the data available, your customers want to have the data. So this cycle is a challenge for the data providers to assure this data is available in the timely manner. Yeah. Okay, Yuri, then thank you very much for your view on this topic. And we have now the next speaker. He's also talking about these business entities, but from a different perspective. His name is Mateusz Zasserman. Hello, Mateusz.
Hello.
In your company, you're working with cryptocurrency payments. One of the important sources of information you use is data about business entities, the type and location of their stores, their transaction accounts, etc. I have also two questions. Where do you need this information? What procedures, what problems do you encounter when using them? And based on your experience, what is your proposal for databases on business entities and their owners? So to what extent should these collections be available for the reuse?
Thank you, Alesh. It's a pleasure to participate on this panel. I'm also a blockchain enthusiast. First, let me just refer to the Mr. Lokar about countries that are different evolutional stages. Yes, it's surely true. Different countries have a very different data sets available on the market. But let's start just with short introduction. What we do here at Eligma, we built a payment scheme actually named GoCrypto, which is basically enabling every merchant to accept payments with cryptocurrencies. But to allow him to participate, to join this GoCrypto, we must somehow onboard it. So we must collect some business data about the ownership of this company or business in a very simple manner. So this is very important to us, that this onboarding stage where we collect this data is not painful for the merchant himself. So why do we need it? Different laws and also the contract needs this data to be filled in. And also we must know our customers which in our case is a merchant, and we must report any potential money laundering or terrorism financing activities to the authorities in the case that anything happens. So what data do we collect? We collect basic company data like addresses, locations of their stores, logo types, unique identifiers like tax numbers, also bank account numbers and information, and information about authorized persons like who is the CEO, who is the director, or other representative, and also the ownership data, so who are the beneficial owners of this business. So when we collect this data, it would be a great benefit if we could autofill all the data, all the collected data to the form before the merchant needs to confirm this data, because therefore we could lower the entry barrier, we could speed up the process and grow efficiently more faster on the market. We are constantly searching for all the services providing this data that's business related or ownership related. But so far, we learned that availability and the accessibility of these data is not a problem, not in Slovenia and also in European Union. Through these searchers, through beneficial owner registers, also registers of bank accounts, we can and we could find these data, but only through website searchers. As soon as we are talking about reuse of this data, about applications, programming interfaces, APIs, either these APIs are not free of charge or they are not even exist in some countries. So we would be thrilled if all this business associated data would be available free on the market. Of course, it is most beneficial for us. We could grow faster. We could onboard as many merchants as we could, not only in Slovenia, but also in other European countries. And if it could be established on the European level, it would be even better. So for now, we see that most of the data must be collected manually from the merchant, but we are able to confirm the data through all these registers and the websites or scrap them from the pages. But we are still waiting enthusiastically on more APIs that would allow us automated filling of these forms.
Mateusz, thank you. So, yes, the challenge about this data is huge, and also the European Commission is renovating the Open Data Directive, and this type of the data is one of the important one for the business development about this data. Okay, thank you. So our next speaker is Peter Wostner. Hello, Peter. You work at the Institute of Macroeconomic Analysis and Development as a government advisor, policy expert, and researcher. And of course, the data is the basis of your work. Above all, their quality and reliability when drafting policies. And also, as we heard today, the time scope is also quite important. So my two questions for you is, what problems do you face in your work? Are the data you obtain is of good quality, or do you need to clean it up beforehand? And based on your experience, what would you recommend to the data administrators to give them greater input in the renewed smart specialization strategy? Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aleš, and hi to everyone, and thank you for the invitation. It's really great. The second question, I suppose, comes from my experience as coordinator of smart specialization until recently. Now I worked at the institute, and you rightly say, I mean, data is the handling of the data is our job. It's not, however, to draft the policies themselves. What we provide is basically compass to the policymaker to make smart design smart policies on the basis of those data. And there, I would say, when you ask me about the problems with the data, it's perhaps, at least in our, in Slovenia, I think, we have a bit of a problem with the data and fighting the stereotypes, the extent to which we trust the data and the research which is derived out of it. And I think it comes to some extent from the history and the culture. Now, I'm mentioning this because I think it's really important, and it's also important at this moment. Now, we're talking here more about this open data and decentralized data sources, but I would also emphasize the importance of the official data, because eventually that's also the part that we need to work on. And here I really like to go back to UK's what they call an evaluation obsession. Sometimes, you know, they actually sometimes give the money to companies so that they actually derive a proper research counterfactual. They give money to someone that otherwise would not get, should not have gotten the money, in order to get a counterfactual. What happens? What if? And I'm using that example to say that the data costs money, and the data is a precondition for smart policy making. And I'm mentioning this now because we know that, you know, with all the crises, the governments or the government, our government, but also others might see the collection of the data and collection of the official statistics as a problem. So just as I'm using this opportunity also as an appeal, if you want, that this is something which is essential to make smart policies. But at the same time, there would also be, I think there are some participants are also from our statistical office in this webinar. I think it's the key forward is by linking different databases together. So our experience from the Institute, of course, is that the quality of the data in Slovenia, the official statistics are really good, both on the level of companies, individuals, etc. But the holy grail, if you want, of the next step is by the capacity to link those. And of course, there is efforts in those direction, but we're not there yet. Second condition for quality, for the use of the data, of course, is then quality of research, which requires continuous investment. And that's something that, you know, the research community is complaining a lot. And I think the government has a role to actually have a continuous and supportive environments to have quality research. I'm coming again back to the UK. I mean, you know, the UK's government is being watched from all sides what it really does. And that really is because there is such high number of top quality researchers. And the third issue with the data that you asked me about, I think it's about what's actually the purpose of using the data and what I would call monitoring. I think too often in our part of the world, we are seeing the use of the data as a way how to get punched. For example, that's not something which is just the case nationally in a political sphere or in the media. It's also sometimes comes out of the EU policies. You know, there's this focus on set the targets first, and then we will measure you against those targets. My experience is that very often drives you to adjusted or misconceptualized policy guidance, because you learn as you go. So that's something which I think we have to be very careful about how in the policy design, the data is used. Now, your second question was about what I would suggest in designing the next round of smart specialization. And I think I would go back to some of the presentations that were there. I had exactly the same message. My word was, what I wanted to suggest as number one was go micro. Whereas Alex Yakulin before used the word go deep. I think we have exactly the same thing in mind. You know, you have, in order to make sensible input for strategy design, you need to go to the firm level, you need to go to the product level, patent level, employee level, and it's only there that you get to the crux of the issue. And that again, the more the linked the databases are, the better information you're able to come up with. But we need to go away from these sectors and, you know, averages, which are really just, I think, going the wrong direction. Secondly, I think it's essential to be very practical. Collection of the data requires time, and in smart specialization, you're dealing with companies, and they're extremely sensitive about any additional administrative a burden that might come that might be linked to this. I think it's really important to work with network stakeholders. That's why these ecosystems, I think, are so important, because they allow what, again, I'm coming back to Alex, they allowed for these closed loops. This is something that we tried to do in the first round, and I think we need to capitalize on that. Now, the question to me is to what extent we can go to these more newer data collection sources. Admittedly, I have to say that other countries have tried that, collecting this micro information on articles, etc. It wasn't very, the experience was very mixed, to say the best. But in our case, what, for example, comes to my mind is something that could be experimented with, is to look at the market potential of different products or product directions, or product domains that will be looked at, and match those or check them with things like event registry and stuff like that, so that you have an overview of what's going on in the world. My final point is on what can be done in terms of acting on the data or using the data. That's something that Emilia was already mentioning on for example, with the work with municipalities. I think my experience on that is that it's essential to create a movement. And it's a movement through which you have to create a focus, and you need to have leadership. Now, there is a bit of a problem. We have this, too often I think we have this project-based approach. Someone gets money for a project, and then it collects data, and then there is a report that people use or even more often don't use. And I think here it's really important, the role of the ministries as well, because they, at least in Slovenia, that's where you get this leadership function. You're able to engage the critical stakeholders much more strongly and much more deeper, because they know that afterwards the government will also step in and support those kind of processes. Here I'm referring in particular to introduction of smart communities or solution based on smart communities, but not only. Urška was talking about tourism 4.0. It's a process that also came out of, at least indirectly, through a support structure of smart specialization. There are technologies there that can solve problems, our challenges right now. For example, how to support the tourism sector. There is this idea of a Corona token that could be used to provide smart demand side support for the tourism sector if the government would go in that direction. But this is the way how you actually, the direction in which you need this ecosystem of stakeholders on the ground on the one hand, and also so the leadership on the ground, but also I think close working and engagement of the government, because then at the end you come to the holy grail of actually making systemic change. Thanks.
Peter, thank you. It's quite interesting speech you have. It's open a lot of things that is a challenge for the Slovenian government and the public sector, especially about dealing with this data, and also with this leadership or somebody who will, let's say, taking a direction of this data management in the Slovenian government. Maybe I can say that maybe it's also the problem because we still don't have, for example, a chief data officer who could be at least point connecting all these different stakeholders to take the appropriate direction of these kind of things. So what is your opinion about that?
I'm not sure that the digital, I mean, it's useful to have a champion for sure in kind of creating the general atmosphere, but at the end there are solutions. For example, I mentioned two. For example, the smart communities, it's the minister of, or the ministry or minister of public administration that needs to take a lead. In the case of tourism 4.0, however, it's a different minister. It's a minister of economy who needs to take a lead. And it's that kind of a, it's also that kind of a network. So it, in a way, I think, you know, you have to create that sensitivity and also a sense of movement, I would say, on the national level. I think that's why Estonia is successful. You know, we all have these initiatives and ecosystems. You know, if you look at all these countries, we're all talking about the same kind of stuff. But, you know, some actually make it, you know, make the jump. And in order to do that kind of a jump, you need to go that extra mile, you know, having the sense that, okay, now it's the time and now we actually do it. You know, we don't just talk about it and, you know, blah, 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 but we actually, you know, we go for it, we make a focus, we decide, and then deliver. So, you know, if I go again back, we close the loop.
Yeah. Okay, Peter, thank you. Thank you very much for your view on this topic. And we will now slowly conclude this part of the conference with exceptional speaker. Our last speaker is Marko Grobalnik. Hello, Marko.
Hey.
He have interesting background. I think he's swimming somewhere. Marko, in 2016, you were named as the digital champion of Slovenia, the European Commission for the period of 4 years. The term is coming to the end this year. Some people, if you're talking about you, people say that you belong to the circle of people who have long struggled to spread the gospel of the digital on the information society and the science. I have first question. If you look back in the last 4 years, could you describe Slovenia's progress in the field of digitalization of Slovenian society? A little bit focused on the opening of data.
Yeah, sure. Maybe first to respond on this chief data officer, I guess, Aleš, you are the closest we have in the country, right? As a chief data officer, which I would say we actually need one. And in a similar way as like in Dubai, they have Minister for AI, right? So I wouldn't mind, you know, having Minister of AI here in Slovenia as well. This would actually boost a lot, right? To promote the topics like this to the highest level, right? In the same way as we had Ministry for Information Society long time ago now, right? So this, I think, helped a lot the country in many ways because the topic itself was promoted pretty high up. Now, your question, in the last 4 years, or I mean, I'm tracking these topics for a longer time, obviously, yeah, it's moving, right? So this digitalization is moving in many ways, also with the help of, well, government, education, European funds, and innovation in general. So why it's moving? Because it's a pressure, right, from all over, right, from the world, Europe, or by just our kids, right, which they don't even know that there was a world before digital devices and so on, right? So it's in a way, I was thinking, so what's pushing things forward? In many ways, the change of generation certainly is pushing advancements more maybe than change of mind. Like if there wouldn't be any kids around with all the fancy services and whatever they use, right? If we would just leave the stuff to the, well, decision makers and other people, unclear how this change would actually happen. Although, now, on the other side, right? So seeing a couple of sectors in Slovenia, like I really like the smart manufacturing sector, right? Where digitalization is a must, right? It's a matter of survival, efficiency, and everything else. So this is moving very good. But we have on the whole spectrum, let's say, of just manufacturing now, from really very advanced factories, right, where digitalization is really on all the levels, almost all the levels, right, down to the factories which still operate on paper, right? So, in a way, the long tail, right, needs a little bit of a help, as I would see. Same thing with health, for instance. Now, with this COVID situation in the last month and a half, right? So, referring back to what Luca, Renko, and Alex Jaculin were, Jaculin, right? If I, as Alex is saying when he's in US. What we saw, what we learned from this COVID situation, that we have data, but the data is not integrated. Going back to what Peter was saying before, integration of data needs to be there. Otherwise, we cannot extract the value out of it. And I hope this experience from last 2 months, maybe, or last couple of weeks, will actually push us a little bit towards this integration, because something like what Luca and Alex and the team did with Slidilnik, this is not something which should be really always where we should expect a grassroots initiative, right, to happen this in a short time with obviously smart people and so on. But this kind of Slidilnik should be ready all the time, and not just for COVID. It should be ready for everything else as well. This is something where, let's say, well, hopefully we learned the lesson, hopefully, right? But we experienced that, well, data was there, but, you know, this data was communicated over the phone, right? Or over the email, right? The secretaries were mistyping the data and so on, right? So this is this digital maturity, right? So data is really just sensing the society or sensing the environment. But there are several steps ahead. So why we are collecting data? Not just to have them, to have the databases right around, and having I don't know, fearful data protection officers around and so on, but actually to extract decisions which would make us more efficient, cheaper, more inexpensive, right? Not cheaper in the other sense, and to have general, let's say, this situational awareness, right? Situational awareness is a term which we would have needed like 2 months ago, but we didn't have it. That's why, and many other countries as well, they made big mistake. Even now, let's say, if you look at this corona situation in US, right? So every 2 weeks they come with the new predictions, right? Prediction, well, I'm working in AI now for tens of years. Prediction is something which you put and it should work, right? Not that you change it every 2 weeks, and basically, let's say US is a good example of how unprepared they are. And US is kind of, they consider themselves as the best, right? But they're not, obviously, right? And the same with other countries. So what this COVID situation, right, related to data taught us is that we should be a little bit more serious. We should be serious not just about collecting, we should be serious about integration, what Peter was saying, the modeling, and also finally to this knowledge extraction, or having kind of good overview of what's actually happening in the data, so that the decision makers, not just that they would get a signal from some analyst, that they should go there and check and understand why they need to decision A or B, or what also Peter was mentioning, the what if, right, scenario, so that we would say, okay, what will happen in society if we make this decision or the other one, right? Or to be able to ask the machine, okay, machine, please tell me what kind of decision should I make? I'm lost, basically, right? So this is all possible today. This is all possible. We just need to have a little bit of awareness, right? So education, I think we have enough smartness, not only in Slovenia, also in Europe and elsewhere. It's just that this message didn't get through. High-level decision makers still are fairly disconnected from this what's possible, right? On the other side, the analysts, right? I'm sitting on, let's say, this ERC board with this groundbreaking research, right? Which we need to evaluate. Great ideas, but it's a huge gap between these top European AI researchers and what actually comes out of it. Right? So just go back to your question, right? So what did we make in the last 4 years? I think we did decent job. Certainly in so many ways we could be so much better, and of course there are plenty of problems, but also plenty of successes and plenty of opportunities which we didn't take yet. And well, just referring back to this COVID situation, I think this could be a nice, good signal, especially for this data situation, which data is actually saving lives here, right? It's very simple. So ignoring the data means that basically you get bloody hands, right, at the end. So it's irresponsible to ignore the data, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so this would be kind of quick pitch on this, right?
Okay, Marco, thank you. You already in your discussion touch my second question. What would you recommend for the field of digitalization, notably on the data field? What is the main challenges ahead? And maybe in the context of this, your idea you're talking about with our ministry about digital twin.
Yeah, so two quick questions, right? Answers. So talking about data means also talking about the methodology, how to deal with this data, right? So AI is really a field, right? So a few years ago, we were talking about big data, and then big data term disappeared, and then term data science appeared, and this is still around, right? But and this is all under the cover of this, what we could call AI, right? So AI is a kind of a set of technologies which can extract value out of data. And so especially AI is not something which was around 10 years ago. Today is obviously a very popular term, but we also need to look ahead, right? So like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What we have today in the labs, not just us, also the rest of the world, and we see what others are doing. So this will be like in 5 or few years time will be on our tables, right? And we can speed up this process just by awareness and being a little bit more connected on that side. So just yesterday we had a first meeting on the new Slovenian AI strategy. Now it's called National Program on AI, right? Which is a little bit more than just a strategy. And it's really good document prepared by Ministry for Public Administration, Samozorc, right? So this is a good plan where to go, right? So read the document and try to comment. So this is really a good way to go. The other side, the other question which you asked, so you mentioned this digital twin, right? Digital twin is something which, in the same way as Luca and Alex, right, started doing this Sledilnik back then because it was actual necessity for it. So we were thinking we were invited to this crisis management center. So we means like AI lab at Josef Stefan Institute. So our plan how to help Slovenia with this AI and these data technologies was to build a digital twin of Slovenia. So for the ones which who don't know what the digital twin is just a digital copy of physical reality, right? So this is it. So we use it in smart factories, so or we can use it in a hospital or for many things, right? For a beehive, right? So we can make a digital twin of a beehive, and the beekeeper can be so much more efficient using it. So in the same way, we can do a digital twin of a country as well. And so this is, well, we did it partly already, right? Now, well, it was long, endless bureaucracy, right? Which was preventing this to be completed by now. So hopefully this will now move on, and under Ministry for Public Administration, why a digital twin? Because digital twin is basically a piece of software exploiting data in real time. This is what Alex Yakulin was mentioning before, data in real time, to have this, the English term is situational awareness, so that at any time point we understand what's happening in a country, and that we can react on the spot, not like too late, right? Whatever too late means, right? It can too late sometimes is minutes, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, right? Or sometimes years even, right? So here the idea is to have at least daily situational awareness of the country, and having this would mean also we can predict we can do what if, we can detect anomalies, so machine can tell us, well, be careful about this and this things, which are maybe not too obvious, right? I mean, here we always deal with information overload. Information overload means that we have just too much data, right? And we need the help of a machine or AI or whatever machinery we have, analytic machinery we have to help us to find a needle in this huge haystacks which we are dealing with as data, right? So yeah, so this would be, so I mentioned this AI strategy, which I think is really on a good way. I hope the government will respond. And okay, this digital twin is a very concrete project, which was our response to this particular situation.
Okay, Marco, thank you. Also, my colleagues now talking me that our time is really at the end. Maybe just a last question for you, but please with yes or no. Are you going to run for a new digital champion term because on the 15th of September your term expires? So please just
yes, of course, okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, there might be competition. I would be more than happy if also somebody more capable than me, you know, would take it over.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Marco, for all great point of view and your view on these topics. Is there any questions in Q&A? I saw that some question was raised and also answered. I hope the attendees, you can see the questions and answer which is in the Q&A section. Is there maybe any other question for our speakers? If not, Katja?
No, I don't think so, but I would like just to point out that here in our chat we have some useful links for our speakers and also for all of the participants. So maybe check these links. For now, there are no additional questions. So thank you to all of you, and Aleš, to you to conclude this panel discussion.
Okay, Katja, thank you. For the final thoughts of this conference, like I said, these speakers, guests, and colleagues, I would like to thank you all, which all helped organize to participate in this conference. Today, we had the opportunity to hear outstanding speakers who helped us to see open data from the different angle. We learned about the challenges that governments face in policy making and the digital transformation of government, because the world is moving into digital direction and governments cannot be an exception. You also get some OECD recommendation of that. Also was expressed some cross-border exchange of the data, which is not a topic, but a more technical issue. And of course, language issue, I would say. And we learned about open data market size, that the real value of the data is as input into the apps or services, about open data employment and new opportunities. Based on the experience of the COVID-19 study, Luca and Alex talk about also the balance between privacy and the public safety, where is the privacy of me ends and there is public safety involved, and also about this real-time data cycle, data loop to new challenge at the societal, governmental, and corporate levels. And what also Peter is mentioned, but also all other was in the deep down, it's interoperability of the data. So usually we have the data per se as a sectoral data, but if you connect this data, you can create a completely new situation. And we also saw some potential in tourism, how we will have some opportunity in the tourism, how we should make the tourism in the new perspective. And also we have heard a great experience from Marco as a digital champion of Slovenia. And at the end, I would like to thank again to all the speakers, the colleagues who helped to organize this event. Without them, we would not be able to carry out this event, and dear guests also to share share this knowledge with you. And maybe for the last thoughts for this conclusion is dealing with this idea that should we see the data as a public goods, as we see the air, the water, because the data is now all around us. And also from the welcome speakers, they mentioned that we don't see the data, but we can feel them. Use the data because we will need the jobs more than nowadays, and the blockchain is useful mechanism of the data holders, and maybe one day basketball player will be paid by cryptocurrencies. With that words, I would like to end my part of this conference, and I'll give the floor now back to my colleague Katja to end today's event. Katja.
Thank you very much, Aleš, and thank you to all of your guests. Dear speakers, thank you for giving us so interesting points for interesting discussion. And thank you for all of our dear guests to give us so interesting presentations today. Let me just remind you that you have a satisfaction survey for conference on open data, digital economy accelerator in your chat. So please fulfill this survey and give us answers. And I would like to say now, I wanted to invite my colleague here, Mateja Prinčić, to sing something for us, but she went out, so I cannot invite her to sing something. So I can say thank you to all of you. Stay well, stay healthy, and have a nice day. And Mr. Grobelnik, you have a beautiful background. So stay healthy and be well. And thank you once again to all of you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.